Welcome, everybody, to Flat Earth Nation. It is a Flat Earth Nation. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. I have a overall interest in getting across how you can better your life, better your eternal life. How you can better your life, better your. It's been a frustrating day for a lot of people because of war, weather. Just they're playing with our emotions. They have a reason for every evil plan that they make. They want it to be, they rig football games. They've rigged lotteries and been busted with the number coming up wrong. They're out. The mafia is out to prove you need protection. And how do they do it in the movies? It's the same way they do it in these wars. They go, you're going to need protection. You need a military that's going to build up your, protect you. Hello, Matt G. Just talking about, the title, The White Race War. How does the mafia prove you need protection? Well, they let you know, hey, you're going to need protection. Oh, really? For my store? Why? Well, things burn, things break. You might get stolen. You might get hurt. You might not be able to work. They're telling them what they're going to do, with that it might be well with them. And a lot of times people pay and then, it's well with them. But is it really well with them? And that's where we're at. I'm trying to get the analogy across. That's where we're at. Our government is the mafia. They've told us we need protection. And what they call your treasure, your taxes, has to go towards that willingly. And then, if something flares up during your lifetime and you're in that age group, go out there and die for mommy and apple pie. Don't worry, your emotions will be whipped up. So it'll seem like a good idea at the time when you're asked, why do I need it? They'll prove to you need it. But how are you in your spiritual warfare? Is there a mafia coming at you? What type of scandals can we all, what is it? When you go through a scandal, what's that called? Because I feel like, I really feel like this last year has been a scandal that won't quit. I've had, I remember a time when we had 90 people in the chat room chatting at one time, all talking, all learning scripture, all doing those things on Flat Earth Nation. Do I miss it? Yeah. Is it the Lord's will? It's obviously the Lord's will now. But what is the confusing part for me is how is someone that was on this show, Noah Church, out there teaching, premillennialism, the golden age past, and other people are catching on. And it's like, oh my goodness, wow, this is great. When did he stop teaching about the rocks? When did he stop teaching about eyeball Earth and decide, the millennium reign, the golden age is past, but Satan is Jesus's brother? We still do need the book of Enoch. After years with me of going like, we don't need Enoch. All we need is scripture. Now they're out there. I just don't see how it's going to go well, because there are people who listen to me who still listen to those people. And I guess never ask, where was the proof of anything you said about me? Where was the proof that Tommy and I abandoned him in New Orleans, when that's where on the night before he was saying, this is where I want to be. I'm glad they brought me here, and everything else. Nobody seems to care. It's not going to be well with you if you know that, these tensions are out there. These Bible studies are not just local, at your Caribou Coffee Club. They don't matter. We had PhDs around the world talking about the stones crying out, the 1,000 years, the added everything. And now we've got, somebody who had pretty much gotten it over, but now is back to the, oh, isn't it just great to be a Christian and find out all about those lost tribes and everything? And maybe Satan's his brother. And I tried, when you get across, look, not only is homosexuality a sin, being effeminate is a sin. And it's not going to be well with the people that, well, they used to listen to me and sometimes they check in on me, but still sometimes they check in on those guys because I still got to go out with my itching ears and find out what's going on. And you know what would be well with me is if we had daily Bible studies like these people with itching ears. Is this true? It sounds like when you listen to Toad House 7, they're on the phone for hours at a time going, is Jesus really Satan's brother? This is exciting, man. That's what's out there. That's what's out there today. How can it be well with you? Will it be well with you? Is anything going to be well with you? How is that honoring your parents? Look who I'm hanging out with, Mom. Because it is the first commandment with promise and how that it may go well with you. And if you ever think, well, my mom's not watching, my dad's not watching, you don't understand the eternal judgment you're going to go through where every word, thought, deed is going to be laid not just in front of your parents, but in front of everybody in the world. And if you're not getting that warning hard enough, well enough on how important that is, and that you should still be honoring them like you honor God, because they are going to see everything you've ever done. And whether they were good or bad, it just because they were bad parents doesn't mean that, well, I can be bad because I don't have to honor them. You do what maybe they were millstone worse than you, but for whatever reason, God has called you to live a life of honor before him that will honor your father and your mother, that it may go well with you. It was the first commandment with the promise. It is a promise, and when God makes a promise, if you hold up your end, always with conditions, if you hold up your end, if you honor your father and mother, that it may go well with you. But if you don't, guess what? You may not live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. God has not provoked us to anger his children with discipline. Other people who cannot stand any reproof or correction, it tells us they're not gods. They hate reproof. They think they've never done anything wrong. That is what was Satan's problem. How could you do it without me? Now, the word, you, well done, well done. Only 5 times out of 6. And the other one is, ooh-wee. You want to see what it's like to be, ooh-wee, that's well done, man. That's Luke 19:7. Tell him, woo-wee, good and faithful servant. These 5 will suffice. I'll take any one of these. He said unto him, well done, you good and faithful servant. The second one, Matthew 25:23. Well done, you good servant. Mark 14:7. Do good to them. Acts 15:9. If you obey the necessary things taught in Scripture, like avoid fornication, Don't eat meat that's been strangled. Don't eat meat that's been offered to idols. And do not ingest blood. If you do those things, it will be well with you. You will do well. Not you will do okay. You will do wowee. That's good. So that it may be well with you, Ephesians 6:3, and your family. You're not millstoning them. You want it to go well with you. We'll leave those open. We want to come back to them. Going over, just, have to turn this into a Bible study because that's all I can do. I can't cry over spilled milk that people would rather keep me in the dark about what's going on while the premillennialist movement is taken over by a swishy boy who never talks about the rocks crying out anymore. And that now Satan is brothers with Jesus, but people want to leave me in the dark about why they don't say, what's my opinion on the person who's being attacked? Or ask Tommy if he really did trick him into going back to New Orleans subconsciously, because right in front of the world, he was telling people, take me there. I got to go to New Orleans, even if the hurricane's coming. Yeah, it hurts. You imagine if it happened to you. You wouldn't bother you. You just shrug it right off. Oh, you're changing the world of theology, and now you're not. That's cool. Well, it's cool with God, and it's not going to be cool with them, because this is something that you're messing with the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Anyway, I've got these, look at, here's Wall Street back in New Amsterdam. This is Broadway. In my regards to Broadway, I guess it is, or whatever it is. Had a canal running down the middle of it. You can see it's got the plazas everywhere. Now, every time this city was attacked, as I got 3 minutes into this, because of this fort that was, this star fort they built, this just kept surrendering because they didn't want to fight. It was like, oh, geez, you're here, you'll be in charge now, like warlords. And they didn't do it. And the reason is, I brought up, this is John Levy's. We'll look at that later. I was looking at the war in Ukraine today, white on white, but it's still kind of a race war because, they're the whites that weren't the European whites that were okayed for, the evolutionary mode. Well, we're the true white people. They were still left with, no, you're kind of like Japanese. You're yellowish. You're not pure white. But when there's some question about whether or not they're white, you don't attack. I want you to compare the first 4 days of this war. There's 3,000 people is a lot. I think it's like that on each side, and now they're fighting back. What happened in shock and awe in the Gulf War with Schwarzkopf, and what happened with the United States? With that first day, it was kind of like, we're sorry there had to be 100,000 civilians killed. We really are, but that's war. Remember the road of destruction coming out of Baghdad, where no matter what it was, they bombed those civilians fleeing. And when they took over the United States and the economic system in the world, on 9/11, when the trade centers fall, it seems like that 3,000 number, 3,000 people were lost in that adventure. 3,000 about people were lost, killed in Afghanistan. About 3,000 people were lost, killed in Iran and Iraq. About 3,000 people were killed on the beach at Normandy that day when they stormed the Omaha beach, but only there. Everywhere else, they just came aboard, with limited resistance. And the only reason there were resistance at the Omaha beach documented is because they were using Croatian prisoners of war and they gave them so much ammunition. And when they ran out, they were taken over. But they had some people with guns making them shoot the people at Omaha Beach until they got about 3,000 and ran out of ammo. And then they took over and came in for their rebuilding. And boy, I was with that army. My uncle too was with that army. Boy, they sure had a hard time delivering gas to Patton's tank, didn't they? Because all the people we know, that was their job. All the people in the movies, yeah. It was a gold hunt. It was like the search for the Confederate gold. It ended up being a search for, they make movies about it like it was a shirt tail reason. Oh, we found the art. We found all the gold and all the teeth they pulled that had gold in them. That was what they were looking for. Amen. Amen. So we're doing Bible study, and we're going over the tabs. Looks like bara in Genesis 1:1 to shape and create. That was something we're going over. Something got encompassed about in the Old Testament, just like a tribe is going to get encompassed about in the book of Revelation. We might try to find time to look at that. When Jesus said, "Behold your mother," to John, the apostle he loved. People always act like Jesus said, he used that term mother. He's like, oh, that's not a real term that other people, it's not mommy. Well, the 26 out of the 80 times he does it, it seems like, the child and his mother will flee. It usually is referring to about Mary, that specific word. But, it can be used, don't love your father or your mother more than me. Don't, those verses, right? His father and mother be joined, and you have to leave and cleave, people. You all know that. But this mother, there's nothing insulting about this mother. She's to be honored. Blessed is she among all women. She was chosen because, and did she question Gabriel? She did not. So, who was deaf for 6 months? Zechariah the priest or Mary, the woman blessed forever? In her memory, this mother, and Jesus never insulted her by calling her this. He never would. He put the apostle he loved in charge of, hey, this is now, hey, mom, this guy's adopting you. You're adopting him or whatever, he's now like that, your mother. And he spoke words that were true to us. And he never said one thing, it's just like, yeah, good thing Jesus was better than his big brother, Satan. So we got that to look forward to. Adam knew his wife. She conceived and bore Cain. I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. She again bore his son Abel. Cain and Abel. I went over this a little bit. Cain he didn't farm, he just brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. He saw an avocado and he picked it. He wasn't there because there was no man to do the tilling of the ground, Well, there was, I guess, there would have been. Because that came in Genesis 2:5 to this Adam and Eve. But that's not how you do it. You'd farm it, work it. Why are you angry? If you do well, will you not be accepted? See, some people can't take correction. It wasn't like God really punished him. He just said, now you know why you didn't get picked for the on the dodgeball. instead of going and doing a few push-ups and, doing some stretching exercises and deciding, I don't like that feeling of not getting picked in dodgeball. I want to do well at this. Instead, you hate the people that are doing well and skip the part about, well, I should improve myself and maybe I'll get picked. Maybe that's a bad example because Jacob was short and limpy and not what women would want. But God took him. You want to do well. I know you do. We got a long show. What's going on here today? So here's the war. Now, where's the road to Baghdad?
100 billion euros earmarked for this as a one-off, and this money will be used for investment in the German armed forces.
This is how whites attack whites. It's not how they attack Baghdad. It's not how, as we found out the other day with manipulating weapons, they incited the Hutus to attack the Rwanda, and boom, one day, 100,000 dead, and it didn't stop until it was 1 million or so. But here we're going to just spend more money, farm the armed forces, but don't worry. There will be scattered abuses that will be brought about. The idea that what it seems to be the goal of this is that in the United States, the left needs the blacks to incite. Because when we go white on white race here, it's going to be all liberals, and that's the people that, support the Black Lives Matter and those group, and that they believe in climate change. And well, imagine if somebody like that wasn't Greta Thunberg, someone like that with, what they like to say is that gravitas, started saying, look, the millennials let us down. The baby boomers did this and the millennials did all this talking and they didn't help us. How dare you act like you're still in charge of climate change and you care? But instead of the screechy voice of, how dare you not listening to Generation X? And the millennials go, we've got this climate change and things under control, young lady. It also happens that you're listening to lies. There is no climate change. And well, there's something going on and they're spending a lot of money to fake it. There is DARPA, there is chemtrails, there's a lot of other explanations that adults could say, have you considered this? Instead of like, did you hear that little kid going, how dare you? Well, millennials, yeah, you did a great job of mocking your parents, us baby boomers, but you're in your 40s now, late 40s. Technically, your millennials are in your late 40s now, the early ones of you. Are you not spending we're spending our children's inheritance. Oh, you're not doing that too? Every single step of the way? You're not the pot calling the kettle black? And now when somebody goes, how dare you, go, shut up. Those are our questions back when we used to don't trust anybody over 30. Yeah, well, those people are in their 70s now. And guess what? They love adrenochrome. They know how to get it. They're not afraid to get it. They're not afraid to manipulate your emotions, have you living in fear. The only reason that the black are going with the liberals is because that's what they want. Because they know that eventually it's going to come down to new governments, a new thing, a new situation. You can't be. You don't even have an idea what a billion is compared to a million. A $1 million $1 bills stacked up would reach the back of a chair. All right. To a billion, you stack up $1 billion $1 bills, it goes like almost to the moon. And these people are dealing with trillions in mind money. They're already using Weimar dollars through computers. and we're acting in white America. If we could just get these guys to realize that white lives matter, or blue lives matter, and black lives matter. Those liberals don't care about those black lives. We'll be getting to some of the, maybe I should just try to find one right now, because I'm going to go backwards. You know, we got the 12 conclusions of the Lollards we're going to go over. They had a Bible study back before, you know, and I'm really beginning to think that some of these people like Wycliffe, they might have been taught by Paul or something, because I mean, these guys, you know, hey, Rome is a bad example. What do you mean, you know, the conclusions of their ceremonies are stupid, ordinating priests that they can't get it, you know, and keeping them celibate. You know, it's leading to sodomy. And this was supposed to be back then. Transubstantiation, what are you guys thinking of? Well, oh, you guys are using witchcraft is what your church and the Catholics are doing, you know, praying for the souls, requesting the dead, financial contributions. It's bribery. How can we consider them a church? But people don't even know, you know, what the Lollards stood for. All they know is that today we have to go, oh yeah, Christians are, you know, Roman Catholics are Christians too, but we can see that there were Lollards not that long ago that went around preaching. Well, there they are right there. It was called Lollardry. And you know, no, but we defend the Catholic Church today. Oh, sure, they filleted people, burnt them alive, but there are, you know, they're Christians too. And if you don't believe they're Christians, you're a judgmental baloney feeder, because they believe the Trinity. And if you don't believe the Trinity, they might start killing people again. Look, they don't even want to show you what this word means, a unique feature of it. I used to do shows about it. I know it was on there. It leads you right back to it. It's because of these guys doing it after the Reconstruction. Hey, we got to fit in somewhere. Don't worry. They have Morgana and all of her incarnations to take up. You know, we're going to be nations now, so let's all just pick a god. Okay, Bismarck said. But other people are going like, it's the Catholic Church against a part of it. Wait a minute. You think these people should rule it? We think we should rule it. Here's the Bismarck playing with the Pope. How could people even take the Pope seriously? Well, they ended up making a deal with it where they could make it work. Somehow they made it work. We'll look at early Christianity and their connection to how it led to Nazism and when it turned under communism, because that was much more recent. You know, we'll talk about the Huguenots, the Waldensians, and just, you know, why am I afraid again of a Roman Catholic type Noahide law keepers who ended up being like, well, I guess we can work with Rome. Because it doesn't work out well with four of them. What was the protest of the Germantown Mennonites against slavery? What did they write? Who were they? It's a hard to read because of the way their language was written and that they had such a higher intellect back then. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a founding document. And I'm begging you, give me a second in this, okay? because this is going to show you that whites and blacks were used as slaves in this country, and Christians stood up against it and they were shouted down. And I'm leading up to that could have been the end of the 1,000-year reign, going into the 1711, that we did all of that. It's happening. Now, blacks and whites, nobody likes it. It talks about it in the book of Revelation. Yeah, you set up all these great things, selling cinnamon, purple, clothes, but then you ended up selling souls and people as slaves. Which one is better? This is what it says. This is what the Germantown Mennonites, when slavery started being allowed. Remember, we just studied the Turks, and we owed them that all that money. We were paying tribute to other countries, to the Bay of Tripoli, and we had to raise money. And the Quakers, those peace-loving Quakers, were allowing slavery. This is history that's been hidden by the people who rewrote the history. These are the reasons why we are against the trafficking of slaves, what they call men's body slavery. As followeth, is there any that would be done or handled in this manner vis-a-vis in the golden rule? Who would want to be captured at sea and say, now you're my slave? Who would want that to happen unto them as it's happening to them now? Vis-a-vis to be sold or made a slave for all time of his life? How fearful and faint-hearted are many at sea when they see a strange vessel, being afraid it should be a Turk, and they should be taken and sold for slaves into Turkey. Now, what is this better done than Turks do? Yea, rather it is worse for them which say they are Christians and just stand by and let it happen. Here we go. For we hear that the most part of such Negroes are brought hither against their will and consent. Christians are going like, these guys have been kidnapped and brought here. And the Roman Catholics and the Quakers and some other Protestants are going, yeah, well, we wouldn't be able to get this done without them. But would you like this done to you? Picking it up, for we hear that the most part of such Negroes are brought hither against their will and consent, and that many of them are stolen. Now, though they are black, we cannot conceive there is more liberty to have them as slaves as it is to have other white ones. There is a saying that we should do to all men like as we will be done ourselves. Make no difference of what generation, descent, or color they are. And those who steal or rob men and those who buy or purchase them, are they not all alike? Here is liberty of conscience, which is right and reasonable. Here ought to be likewise liberty of the body, except of evildoers, which is another case. You know, if like somebody murders, that's right. You can't, we'll lock you up. Sorry, we're locking you up. You killed somebody. But to bring men as slaves or to rob and sell them against their will, we stand against, as anybody would. Chattel slavery. In Europe, there are many who oppressed for conscience sake. And here there are those oppressed which are of a black color. And we know that men must not commit adultery. Some do commit adultery in others, separating wives from their husband and giving them to others. And some sell the children of these poor creatures to other men. Do consider well this thing, you who do it, if you would be done at this manner, and if it is done according to Christianity. Can that be rephrased any way that to make it understand the golden rule? You're working somebody. This is your slave you just bought. How did it happen? They caught him at sea and said, you're our slave now. And Christians are going, it's capitalism, man. Deal with it. The Bible says it's cool. No, it doesn't. And Quakers should know better. But their women preachers were going like, yay, I get to preach. And I have a slave to make me breakfast. And we're so peace-loving and cool. This makes an ill report in all those countries in Europe where they hear of it, that the Quakers do here handle men as they handle the cattle. And for that reason, some have no mind or inclination to come hither. And who shall maintain this your cause or plead for it? Truly, we cannot do so, except you shall inform us better hereof, that Christians have liberty to practice slavery. It says these things. Pray, what thing in the world can be done worse towards us than if men should rob or steal us away and sell us for slaves to strange countries, separating husbands from their wives and children? What's worse than that? It was done to white people, the Irish and everybody else in Europe, and now they're hearing that they're doing it to the blacks here, and it was the end of the golden age. Being now this is not done in the manner we would be done at, therefore we contradict and are against this traffic of men body. That's what they called slavery. They didn't know what else to call it, because it certainly wasn't the slavery taught in the Bible where after 7 years, you're free. Even if you were going, saying, I didn't pay off my debt, I need 7 more years. After 50 years of Jubilee, you're free. There is no this men body for the rest of your life and any children. Continuing, and we who profess that it is not lawful to steal must likewise avoid to purchase such things that are stolen, but rather help to stop this robbing and stealing if possible. Right, that's the negative commandment leads towards the positive. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt try to prevent people from stealing. Continuing, and such men ought to be delivered out of the hands of robbers and set free as in Europe. Preparing for the 1948 influx of those freed slaves here to buy kit towns on credit. Then is Pennsylvania to have a good report? Instead, it hath now a bad one. For this sake, in other countries, especially whereas the Europeans are desirous to know in what manner the Quakers do rule in their province, and most of them do look upon us with an envious eye. But if this is done well, what shall we say is done evil? If the United States is being founded the right way, then what in the world is evil? What is the wrong way to found a country? Lying and stealing it, using one imported race of slaves to kill off the indigenous of another, keeping treaties to the king of Tripoli while writing 506 treaties to the indigenous that you were going to break. They do continue in this short condemnation of slavery from the end of the golden age. They continue. If once these slaves, so they did know that wicked word, which they say were so wicked and stubborn men, not really men. They considered them the beasts of the field. Should join themselves, fight for their freedom, and handle their masters and mistresses as they did handle them before, will these masters and mistresses take the sword at hand and war against these poor slaves? Like as we are able to believe, some will not refuse to do. Oh, we'll control them even if they outnumber them. We'll rise up because they're all stupid. Or, as it continues, have these poor Negroes not as much right to fight for their freedom as you have to keep them as slaves? if might makes right and they captured you fair and square as a slave, you will do your work until such circumstances as now they're the slaves and they'll do your work for you. Two more paragraphs, and one is just a sentence long. Now consider well this thing, if it is good or bad to have slaves for life by stealing them in a Quaker Christian country. And in case you find it to be good to handle these blacks in that manner, we desire and require you hereby lovingly that you may inform us herein, which at this time was never done, vis-a-vis that Christians have such liberty to keep people like this. To the end, we shall be satisfied on this point and satisfy likewise our good friends and acquaintances in our native country, to whom it is a terror or a fearful thing that men should be handled so in Pennsylvania. This is from our meeting in Germantown, held on the 18th of the second month, 1688. To be delivered at the monthly meeting at Richard Worrell's, who doesn't even rate a Wikipedia page. Does get something in the Mosner genealogy. Let's see what John said. Children of the corn, young lives will matter eventually. That's one species I was once. A race of age against generation against the soon to be born, while ignore those of us led quietly to their grave. Manipulation by a psychopath, also known as a minion of the enemy, NC will expose his immature eschatology. And it's just a matter of time, and it's hard. And what I want to know is that, it's like, what really struck me is that, and they were on the phone for 2 hours with this guy, and then he called another guy for 2 hours on that guy. And that can be the greatest time of your life when you're really studying the Bible and you're figuring it out. And, right now, Randy and Tommy, we can't talk for hours and hours at a time every day. And it's nice to get new input on it and stuff like that. But it's like, honestly, you're supposed to have the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses before you just go from like, wow, thanks, everything seems great. Premillennialism, the rocks are crying out, the Nephilim, and then all of a sudden an accusation without ever the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. And it's just like, in the back of my mind, are people still buying that? Because there's still people like Webb Danubi. I haven't heard from him, not one thing. And I thought we were friends. Are those not supposed to hurt me? Because, well, I'm going to keep focusing on the Bible. I'm going to keep doing what the Lord taught me, but is it supposed to be, weren't we friends? I thought we were.
My lease. I had the idea I wanted to get out, and suddenly I got a knock on my door. Window, more precisely. A lady said she represents a doctor and he would like my place. My landlord contacted me, and I told him I would like such and such a number to prematurely exit my lease. And within 12 hours, I had an eviction notice on my door. The terms were clear: either evict or open my coffee shop back up, because that's the only thing I was allowed to do. So I did. After doing more research than I would have liked on the law and my contract, I asked my landlord if we could settle this through mediation, as it was stated in my contract that any conflict would be resolved through mediation. And I want to shout out Leanne at the Brigham Young University. I was very, very happy with their free mediation service, and they were excellent. They did exactly what mediators should do. Bring everything to the table so that both parties can feel comfortable with the deal without getting emotional and the deal falling apart. So now my lease legally ends March 1st. All my stuff is out of there. I've spent all week moving all my shit out in a snowstorm and minus 10 degrees. The perfect storm. Of course it would be. And in the end, I will be selling the coffee shop or the equipment to my landlord. I'm kind of in an in-between state now. I've hastily moved into my new addition, even though it's not even finished. Happy to have it mostly finished. I was expecting at least another month, but that's how life is. I asked. I did say I wanted out. I didn't say how. And here I am, recording for the first time in over 3 years from my land, from 6,000 feet in the high desert. Thank you for being here, and welcome.
You know what? It's, for me, John Levy made comments on my video before he made one video. He hasn't accepted the Lord, but he has stood by what he started. He's doing something. So I'm going to get into, it may do well. Good. I'm glad I had 17. Now down to 8 people watching. You think he's real behind a veil? Anyway, watch John's video. Come on.
And once I almost went to a nice school, and I was naive and thought I should go to school. And I walked up to the main counter and asked for some information and realized it was way too expensive, first of all. I could not afford it and had no grants or anything. And fast forward, I learned everything that I wanted to learn. At the time, I wanted to learn photography, and how stupid to go to school to learn photography, because I ended up learning everything I wanted to know by reading magazines, seeing what tricks and techniques the photographers use to attain specific results. And maybe I spent $100 in magazines as opposed to 30 or 50,000 or whatever it was. But my point was, the school that I had innocently walked into, inquiring on an education, was in such a castle. This was the Westminster College in Salt Lake City. And we're told it's one of the oldest buildings in Salt Lake. And I've mentioned before that I've always had this feeling when I'm in old buildings. It's not until recently that I've begun to express and understand what I felt. But at that time, I felt it too. I thought, what is this? This is not a college. Everything about it was strange. Even the idea of paying such an exuberant amount of money to learn photography, for example. But then I was in this castle. And what the hell was I doing in this castle? Why did this make any sense? And I walked out of there, but never forgot how strange the place was. And when I began doing this research, I became very excited and remembered this Westminster College. So we'll get back to the postcards, but let's look at this college for a moment. Here we are at Westminster College, Utah. This college was founded in 1875 in Salt Lake City as a prep school. At the time, it was called the Sheldon Jackson College, named in honor of its primary benefactor and minister, Sheldon Jackson. In 1902, the name was changed to Westminster College. Originally located downtown, the college moved to its present campus on 27 acres in the Sugar House neighborhood in 1911, where it's still located today. And so this is the place where I would have walked in naively, and I didn't even realize it was 27 acres. And just across the street from this place is the Sugar House Park. And when we say park, of course, alarm bells begin to go off. And what was in this Sugar House Park at one point, before being demolished in 1950, was the state prison, the state castle prison. So one castle, founded in the late 1800s, this prison stood until 1950 in its castle-like glory, and then was demolished. And yet across the street, another castle, this one that we're looking at, the Westminster Castle College, complete with millions of bricks, sandstone, and who knows what else. And mind you, I don't want to say it was built in 1875, because here even they tell us the truth. It was founded in 1875 as a collegiate institute. 1875, the Mormons arrived in the 1860s in a very primitive fashion. Horse, wagon, mules, oxen, roughing it across the West, many dying. And it's impressive enough that we have the beautiful state prison in the Sugar House Park, as we can see here. But within 10 years, they just threw this college up? Not even a Mormon college. Why must everything be a castle? Why must all the schools be castles? The prisons be castles? Armories? Insane asylums? And really, when you start to look at it from a big picture perspective, everything was castles. Just down the street, we have the Salt Lake City Temple, which is a grand castle surrounded by smaller works of wonder. The Salt Lake City and County building opposing the temple, maybe 4 blocks away, is also a castle, perhaps even more beautiful, just a different style, just as this is a different style. And this is upon the inception of this, what we are told is a virgin city. And I'm telling you, they've begun omitting their little construction bit. They used to give us a little attempt or explanation of the construction, which was my favorite. It was like the comic section in the newspaper. But here I wanted to play Where Are We? It's been a while. Where could we be? A very similar architectural style. We have bicycles, bustling with bicycles. Perhaps this is a bank. These men seem very confident in their place in time. And this is in Japan, the Yokohama Bank. Next specimen, where are we? Antiquitech in the background, horse and buggy, some trolleys, and a very massive building. Excessively massive for these people who look like they're just barely getting by.
And I haven't
Just my
seen it.
take and feel. Surely we could have cut this building in half. The doorway is at least 3 times, possibly 4 times the size of this man. What function
Actually,
could such a
5.5
building
times
serve?
his size.
But not the point. Where are we? Where in the world are we? How would we know? This building could be anywhere. With its glorious Corinthian columns. This
Buenos
is
Aires.
Argentina. In
Yes!
French, argent is money. And I see the word argent in Argentina. And somebody had money. And this one will be fun. A lot of hustle and bustle. Doorways again, 3 times the size of the people. Super elaborate and excessive. As if someone just had a blank check and told the builder to spare nothing. Where could we be in this early
Mexico.
time period? Just rolling out with the first few models of the automobile,
Mexico.
it looks like, but still having some horse and wagon
Mexico City.
alongside. This is in a country that gave us the Buena Vista Social Club, one of my favorite
Cuba,
bands.
Havana.
A great band to listen to on a Sunday. And this is Cuba. We've looked at star forts in Cuba and a coastline just riddled with absolutely advanced architecture, even more advanced than this. But again, this could be anywhere. And how about now? This looks like some glorious kind of coliseum or stadium, circular amphitheater plus. We see a couple guys over here in the corner looking very serious. And I don't know about this street, looking very altered. The blurriness meeting sharpness so abruptly. And I think this baby is in ruins. If we look at this staircase, it kind of seems broken and crumbled. Of course, they would tell us it was under construction still. But I think it looks like it's in ruin. And where are we? What nation do you guys belong to? These 2 men over here standing on a pyramid-shaped pile. I'm not sure. These natives are from Pakistan. This building, I think resembling one of the stadiums in New York and resembling a lot of modern stadiums. We see this style repeated. And here we are in old Pakistan. And this one I'm going to have to be careful with and not give it away too soon. Just amazing. And again, looking old. This looks so old, it looks unused. And the tech and the metalwork. This is so expensive. All of this would be so expensive to do today. That's why we use cheap wood and sheetrock and just face things with stone and half brick facing. It's so damn expensive, and this stuff is quality materials right down to the core. And I don't know what's going on. There's all kinds of little apparatus sticking out here. Perhaps these are flagpoles. Let's scroll down a little and give you a little peek. We see people struggling back here with water buckets on each side of the shoulder.
I don't see
We
that.
see a rickshaw, a bunch of rickshaws. Here are the builders. Here are the builders. Hello, builders. How did you build all this? And these people can't answer us because they were all wiped out in Vietnam. Here is a theater in old Vietnam. And just to remind you, the true purpose of war. How completely clear could anything be from this image? Again, nothing special about this architecture. Seen everywhere. It's when it's put in context. It's when some perspective is shown on this snapshot in time. This architecture and these people. I mean, these people don't even have horses. We're just pulling things around like we just invented the wheel. Here, this poor mule is just being pushed to the limit on some sort of drum, liquids, maybe just water. And here we go. These people just inheritors of this region, completely out of...
You know what? It might not be it might not be that these were inheritors, because this is a good way to do it. Now, we don't know this guy is worked to death, this ox, but the streets are clean. There's no pollution. Using, that might have been a choice, is all I'm saying. I understand, but I'm so down on petroleum now that this is a good choice, that in the long run, it'd be better. And this hauling something, he could be hauling water, watering down the street to keep the dust down, for all we know, really.
Place, Vietnam. And here a beautiful.
Now that looks like a rebuild. There's no roads or anything. This is just an abandoned building.
Beautiful castle, looking like it's been abandoned for at least 50 years. And yet somebody seems to have excavated much dirt. Just a mud pit all around it, but cleaned up. And look at this elaboracy. Again, someone with a blank check plus a good tip thrown on top. What? And just looking abandoned, always a couple guys in suits in the corner. Perhaps this one is a woman, just hanging out. Of course, we'll be told this is post-construction, and these men are just waiting for the landscapers to arrive. Where could this be? This could be anywhere, and this could be anything. This beauty is in Africa, South Africa. Exactly what comes to mind when one thinks of Africa. This one's too difficult. If I show you too much, it's going to give it away. And this baby is just crumbling. Look how chunks are just missing up here. It looks like it's really been stripped, just hit with hammers, and ornamentation just busted off. And look up here. Just be careful not to show you that flag. I don't know if it's me, but nonetheless, let me show you another one. Okay, I have to be careful. Where are we? Same place. I think this is that building we were just looking at. Oh, you can kind of see the flag. And I've shown this in a past video before. Just a massive chunk of building here. And the clock, and it just goes on and on. Where is this? Ta-da! This is China, or as I said in a past video, China. Unbelievable. And real quick, just another Chinese ruin right here. Simply the ruins. Some sort of cathedral. Okay, where could this be? This is too innocent.
No, it's not. No, this is a good example, John. You see, you pay extra for the embellishments on the kit in the front, but the back is just basically your 3-foot thick brick building. It's your basic brick building, and then you embellish around it. So, like when you see that, this building is damaged, that's only the dressed up part of it. You could reorder those parts from a kit, and let's see, we're at 1704. And then you could just add it, what do they do? They flip it, they fix it up, make it new again.
Chinese ruin right here. Simply the ruins. Some sort of cathedral. Okay, where could this be? This is too innocent. Let's go a little hardcore. Here we go. Amazing. The Public Trust Office. And look at that. Tech antenna. And the thing just looks like shit, actually. Look here. It's like the facade is crumbling.
Trust me, the Public Trust Office is inconvenient to get to. And why do you need it? The public should just trust the office. If it was really worthy of trust, you wouldn't need an office to go like, I want to complain about the public trust.
Off, revealing the brick. The facade is barely holding on. And here too on the columns, you can see how sections have either been painted, just touched up, maybe chunks were falling off onto the people. And here we do have automobiles, very early models, and some old tech lighting. Where could we possibly be? This is actually one of my favorite examples, besides San Francisco and Salt Lake City being so young as states and then just looking like all this stuff found everywhere. This one is also very anomalous, doesn't make any sense. This is New Zealand. And New Zealand, horse and buggy, early time period, sending prisoners off, we're told, to a remote area as a sentence. And then this, bone, this, suddenly so old and weathered and as glorious as any part of the realm. I was always told that they were very resourceful in New Zealand because they didn't have much supply and goods and they were forced to be handy. And I had even seen that with my own eyes. They were very resourceful and handy people. But when I see things like this, that doesn't make any sense. Clearly, there was enough of everything back then to do what everybody in the world was doing. New Zealand. And let's do one more. I love this one. And this really held up well. And yet we see she's been...
Even I kind of hope that you guys are waiting, going like, oh, I can't wait to get to the Bible study. I can't either, but I do, we've got time. I'm not going to be doing anything anyway. What are you going to be doing anyway? Put them in the comments if anybody comments anymore.
And through hell, the discoloration, the reds, the dark browns, the staining, and yet it's made of such excellent concrete that all of this detail is held up. Unbelievable, just glorious. And where could we be? We could be anywhere. This place is out in the desert, in an absolute wasteland, formerly the site of a glorious civilization, we are told. The land was covered in palm trees, and currently this place is known for some of the largest pyramids in the world. This is Egypt, not what you think about when you think about Egypt. And it's very fun to play Where Are We? Because it forces you to consider what you've been taught to think about places. And here's another old Egypt pic. And again, old Egypt. Very old, but not that old. And I could play this game forever, but for the sake of time, I think I'll leave it there. This last one is from Canada. And so once again, here we are, looking at similar style buildings, not only all over the world, but similar within one city. Salt Lake City is one of the best examples because it's one of the newest cities along with San Francisco. And both Salt Lake and San Francisco are chock full of these same types of buildings, these old world wonders. And I think there's no stopping this awakening, especially with the internet. I think this understanding will continue to spread and grow for years to come. And there's an expression that says, change happens one death at a time. And it's a very patient approach, very Taoist and accepting. One just waits for change, one death at a time. And eventually, those that pushed the old paradigm are gone. And the ones that are left have no strength left, no fuel, no ammo. They've been exposed and they just let it go. But it's difficult to say. If people continue to get their information from the wrong sources. A, they will never even see things like this. And B, they will just believe whatever they are told. They'll never be taught to be critical thinkers. That is not what the system encourages. But I think the controllers have gotten so greedy in these last few years that this will ultimately be their demise. So greedy, squeezing every last bit of.
Isn't this sad? The last couple of minutes? My goodness. John, it's so sad. Man, I do remember Electronic Projects. Doug and I were so happy that he used some pictures because, you know, at the very beginning, Christian, you remind me of when this all started, and it was Doug Bartles, and we put out some videos, and then when Electronic Projects used the one, I know the one you're talking about, the Schallenberg underneath the Niagara Falls, and he used one of Doug's pictures because Doug was is probably, I don't know what he's doing, he's encompassed about. He does insurance, and whenever there's a major disaster, he goes there and pays the people, writes the papers, and here's your money and stuff. And he would take pictures around for me, and we'd study them and mud flood it. And Electronic Projects, yeah, he was the one that brought out so much about the New Madrid fault line that got us all going and things like that. I do want to look up I'm going to pull up a new tab here. Let's see. And I think you're still looking at me, but I don't want you to have to live through it. So chat for yourself. I'll try to look this up fast. It's the Iron Curtain speech. And the college that it was given at by Churchill in 1946, it looks like. I think that the college that happened at, well, I might as well, you know what? You might as well just go ahead and watch me look it up. Because I'm getting there now. Here's the Iron Curtain. Where's the Iron Curtain speech? Winston Churchill gave the Iron Curtain metaphor in Fulton, Missouri. Okay. Now, I believe they have a Westminster College there that reminded me when John Levy was talking about, yeah, this castle was there and it's not even a Mormon. And I'm there like, well, I stopped at another, and I was going through Fulton, Missouri. I used to travel this country doing all my own pictures and research. This is actually my 4th YouTube channel. And it's a private college established in 1851. They keep the sacred geometry's perfect number of 108 administrative staff with an academic staff of a suspicious 88 for some people. But the real reason that caught my mind is that Churchill came here in 46 to give this speech. Reagan's been here to give famous speeches, and it popped into my mind, and being the chosen vessel of God, I thought I'll be led by the Spirit, and why not just share it right now? Let's do this live. Because, it was the gutters. When we get right down to it, and you say, where did the Spirit come from that brought you here? It's the gutters that was out of place in this old building, because at this point in my history, I was still on somehow the whole earth had been terraformed. I hadn't had my 2017 trance. So now Tiger Doug hasn't been around for 5 years. There were the two Dougs for a while and everything, you know. Everything changed. Right now it's all about who am I? You know, most people, it's kind of like they might have kind of heard of me, you know, or something like that. But when you see the gutters, the copper gutters and the patina that's on them that is a lot thicker than is on the Statue of Liberty. So we got that Sharon again. Yep. Where's that chapel? Oh yeah, see it was in that Presbyterian church, Westminster Confession of Faith. I believed at one time that the Westminster Confession of Faith was divinely inspired, like some Q-tards believe the Constitution was divinely inspired. I would say next to the Bible, the Westminster Confession of Faith is the most important book in the world. I honestly did. It documented. I said that. And now I don't even, you know, here I am a big Trinity basher. The Churchill Institute for Global Institute was created in 2013. What's that have? I went to college. I'm on Westminster College. Wow. So that's how they get their money. Where's the chapel? There's a Westminster College gymnasium. We'll look at that. They got some gold medals involved here. They got the hall was built in 1911. There's the Westminster Hall. Now, I did not see this building. I didn't have time. I was just fascinated on the chapel and the surrounding canal. I didn't even know that it had these famous Corinthian towers just propped up there. I mean, that's probably a show unto itself. There it is. Doggone it, if it wasn't a Christopher Wren design, and they're claiming it's a rebuild of St. Mary. Yeah, see, now you know why this is why I couldn't get over to that other stuff. I was all over this. There's Churchill. Yeah, right there. Yeah, I was all over this, and I couldn't get out, and I only had one day, and I couldn't get off this piece of property. This was not here. I don't know what that is. Yeah, it's the gutters that seem too old. They had a Churchill Museum there, and I didn't even know it. Hey, look, they got a bunker. They're in a bunker. It's old-fashioned. They didn't even have a phone that she could listen to. Your museum is not very modern. The breakthrough speech, this is where they said there's an iron curtain dropping over now. We're in the Cold War. Christopher Wren inspired Great Fire of London in 1666. Whoa! Hard to tell the difference between the fall of Jerusalem. Gonna fly now. So we got that. This predecessor of this church building was originally constructed London during the 1100s, but burned down in the Great Fire of London in 1666. This church was erected as its replacement by Christopher Wren in the 1600s. During World War II, when the Wren Church was gutted by German bombs, and in the mid-1960s, it was dismantled and shipped stone by stone to Fulton, Missouri, and reconstructed here on the Westminster campus. Today, the church serves as the college's chapel. While it is occasionally claimed that the St. Mary's is the oldest church in North America, the statement is not accurate. The transported Wren building is not the original building from the 1100s of the St. Mary Aldermanbury parish of London. It is instead the replacement that was built under Wren's direction between 1672 and 1677, containing a single set of stairs from the medieval period, being an almost entirely new construction made largely of Portland stone that Wren had quarried in Dorset. This would make it considerably newer than such ancient North American buildings as the church in San Francisco, in Tlaxcala, Mexico. Let's see if it looks like that one. Tlaxcala. Christopher Wren inspired. Probably a lot underground there, yet we haven't seen any pictures of this. Gymnasium. Just a high domed, vaulted ceiling, very Corinthian columns. So I'm not sure, was it in the 60s? When was the speech given there? Gutted in the Blitz. So it was given, Churchill made his sinews of speech, Iron Curtain speech, in this, he made the speech there, and then it was sold to Fulton, Missouri in 1966. What? They got the Globe Theater involved in this? Is Shakespeare, John Dee are now in play? Come on. Christopher Wren, Winston Churchill, Fulton, Missouri. First Anglican famous missionary, got hanging judges, and it ended up in Fulton, Missouri with Ronald Reagan being there. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons people like John Levy and everybody else, but that doesn't mean there's not theology that we live by. You know, I hate to disappoint you on the pictures of those gutters. It just might not be worth it, you know? We had a good, interesting rabbit trail there from John's video.
No fuel, no ammo. They have been exposed, and they just let it go. But it's difficult to say. If people continue to get their information from the wrong sources, A, they will never even see things like this. And B, they will just believe whatever they are told. They'll never be taught to be critical thinkers. That is not what the system encourages. But I think the controllers have gotten so greedy in these last few years that this will ultimately be their demise. So greedy, squeezing every last bit of liberty and money out of the system. And surely they should have known that such things don't work. The parasite can't kill the host, or even make the host sick. That is not beneficial to either party in the long run. But I think all the lies that have been propagated for the last 150 years have been done in a very tight and controlled way with a long-term plan, a 100-year plan. And this 100-year plan involves every nation in the realm. And we saw this in the last 2 years. How quickly did every nation jump in the boat together, massaging each other? All these nations that supposedly don't agree on anything just jumped in this boat without hesitation. And I've talked about other examples where they just jump in the boat, suddenly begin marinating as one, and that would be the Antarctic Treaty. Over 50 nations on board in complete unison with this treaty that nobody should be allowed to go to the southern regions of our realm. And here, very similar. But my point is, I don't think they have a 100-year plan now. I think this is the end, and we have the third and fourth generation removed inheritors of the original controllers and creators of this plan. And now it's just done, and there's no vision, and they're sloppy, and perhaps stupider than we even know. And I do think they are sloppy. Again, their stories are comedy to many of us, repeating the same themes. And if one was just to scratch the surface of history, a little here, a little there, one may not notice these similarities of false narratives. Unbelievable, this one. These photos are from stolen history, and my condolences to the family and loved ones of the kind man who passed recently. Very, very strange passing, very upsetting. So I think I'll leave it there today. Maybe I'll pop back in for a bonus. I was just going to do 10 minutes here, and I was just going to look at these pictures to stimulate my thoughts, some kind of backdrop, and I'm very tempted. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me, and do have a blessed day. Please like, comment. Oh, I forgot I don't say that anymore. I love you all. God bless. Next. Scratch that.
Taoist. He said he was a Taoist. Whatever a Taoist is, they love everybody. Yeah, they're the same buildings all over the place, man. That's crazy. Well, let's do some of that thing about that it may be well with you. Or no, Not yet. We got to get some more fascination with this mud flood stuff. I promise right now. Okay, this might make some of you people sad and go, well, I'll just stay for the last video, because I promise this will be the last video before we get into some Bible about, how we started. That I want it to be well with you. And Jesus even put things in the Bible that say, even the Bible verses, so that it may be well with you. And, it can't be well with us all the time. In this life, you'll have tribulation. Be of good cheer. He's overcome the world. Sufficient today is the trouble thereof. Other ones, too. So the last video is that one about the, I don't even know. And did they do something with the YouTube now where you can't tell how long ago this was put out? I mean, I see it as from 7 months ago. So it's probably a little older than that. 3 months ago, 2 weeks ago. It's still getting some play. But the Lord, had this worked up in my algorithm for today, the Geography Geek, and I'm not subscribed, and it had a big G, but whatever, they're like, I want to check it out. It's cool. Seems cool. Hey, look, this is how it started.
He reported back that this land was fertile, was populated with natives willing to trade, and that there was an abundance of beavers which could be exploited for commercial purposes.
I know, he said beavers, get it out of your system, okay? So they came here to get the beavers. There you go, get it out of your system, all right? Look at these, this is why I stuck around. He's getting some maps in close, and we just can't get enough of that. Look, there's beavers. There they are. They always got like a monkey face, don't they? That's what they slap the water with. They eat the wood, and then they eat their own poop, too, to help digest their food. It's weird, I know. Hey, monkey beaver. There's another one here. They look like letters that we know, but the words, they have that Q there. There's that U, V, Pequot. Mohicans. You've heard only about the last of them. That's a pretty, hey, let's do some business. That's okay. That's not that great of a map. That's a pretty good. We got a lot. This is actually Manhattan. They built this star fort here, but they never really,
New Amsterdam. The fort provided protection, but it also served as the center of trading activity for all of New Netherlands, which brought with it opportunity.
Yeah, it was New Netherlands, and that's the funny thing is that it's so small. You wonder, how did it get to be a world power? We just did. Because they made a deal with the Native Americans, and they were going to, this.
And demanded New Netherlands surrender. The British promised the settlers they could continue their way of life. The locals had also lost their loyalty to the West India Company after repeated requests of the company to provide them with protection.
See, because that's how white people fight each other. They did it without any bloodshed. They said, yeah, okay, you can just roll over us. But the maps,
took back New Amsterdam in 1673, renaming it New Orange, before giving it back to the English at the conclusion of the Third Anglo-Dutch War. The Dutch actually briefly, and just like the English had, peacefully, took back New Amsterdam in 1673, renaming it New Orange, before giving it back to the English at the conclusion of the Third Anglo-Dutch War, essentially trading it for the full.
I'm just saying, it doesn't seem like when you think of the Tet offensive, because we false flagged them, when you think of the road of death leading into Baghdad, when Schwarzkopf, I mean, the whole title of that, shock and awe. Oh yeah, they killed 100,000 people the first day, but well, you just saw white people go like, look, let us rule you. Okay, all right, good. We didn't have to kill anybody, this and that. But when they do get to killing, it's a form of race war. It is them, all of a sudden they don't like the Croats, or why did Italy stop helping the Nazis? I'm sad to tell you that they told them, sorry, Italy, you'll never be considered white. You'll only be considered non-Jew. So Italy said, then we're not going to help you anymore. And then so the people said, what? We can't be white. You said we would be. And they killed Mussolini.
Starting from Fort Amsterdam and heads north, became what we call Broadway. Today's Broad Street once housed a canal, which was also likely used as a sewer. On the settlement's northern limit is Wall Street. On English maps, there are two different spellings in the Dutch language, De Waalstraat and De Walstraat.
Neither one of which I would ever figure was Wall Street, because they spent my time when I was in school saying we'll get to it as soon as there's no child left behind. So I was spent with a lot of time twiddling my thumbs. But I do know that the wall was never like a little palisade wooded picket fence. Although they did, how long ago did people dress like that? Not that long ago. There's a little bit of the original Wall Street. So they really did have the Netherlands in charge of the whole world at one time. Kathy just came out to do the laundry and had to hold her nose because of all this smoke in the garage. I'm going to have to get some sort of an exhaust system. That poor lady, she's never been around this cigarette smoke in her life, I don't think. These maps, right? This is what I wanted you to see. I guess you can get a lot of power if these are working right and you use it right, and you don't expect it to power your whole situation. New Amsterdam, New York, peacefully surrender here from the year of our Lord 642. Part of the golden age, that's my contention. But the very end of it, when normal people thought other people could be slaves, like they did in Jerusalem, I guess, in 70 AD, things must have been worse. Still there today, but that's not from New Amsterdam, just built over it. On its foundations, has to be the same foundations on an island, I'm guessing. And with all of those tunnels and electric powered tunnels underneath it everywhere, people from around the world want to be either a bull or a bear on that famous Wall Street. There's Pennsylvania. They didn't like the slavery.
foundations of our democracy didn't come from New Amsterdam, where else did they come from? What about St. Augustine? Founded in 1565 by the Spanish, it was the first permanent European settlement in what would become the contiguous United States. But St. Augustine wasn't part of the United States when the U.S. was founded, and the settlement decided to destroy the French outpost of Port Caroline simply because they were Huguenots, whom the Catholic Spanish considered to be dangerous heretics. What about
Now, the Huguenots, they never did join with like the Lollards and some of the others, the Amish or the Mennonites. They joined with and eventually, it seems like, became subservient to the Roman Catholic Church. That's not how you spell it. I've just got to look it up. They're Huguenots. Wow, is it that far off? French Huguenots. You know, this is a familiar name to some of you people. And I'm not trying to say that I'm related to him, but I am trying to say that he has the idea that you have been hearing from me, the Huguenots. And I know that I made a promise to you and I'm going to keep it. But we are going to get ready. You know, I wonder if there's anything about him. We'll look that up and prepare it. We want to get ready to tie it into this history lesson because we're going to do a Bible study and then a history lesson and then a Bible study, hopefully. Now, these are the people I've told you about in the Bible. Nicodemite. No, we don't like them. And it is a term of disparagement because it's it's like the Nicolaitans. The people love them, and if you love the Nicolaitans, you really can't love Jesus. It's who they're warned about in Revelation chapters 2 and 3. So let's look at how we can honor your father and mother the rest of your life. Everything you think and say, whether in public or in secret, is going to be known in front of the whole world. And your father and mother are still your father and mother. And if there was ever a do what I say, not what I do, that's good advice. If you're, because it's just good advice. If they're saying, read the Bible and do that, it's never too late to honor that. We don't know how heavy their millstone is. We only know that if we're born again, we will strive to honor our father and mother the rest of our lives. It's the first commandment with a promise. It will be well with you. That it could be well with you, Ephesians 6:3. And it's only used these 4 other times as the woo, woo, you know, that you will do well. And I don't know. I got to look and see if I have that pulled up. I don't. So we're going to need it. And do good to them. So we'll need that one also. Well done, you good and faithful servant. Well done, you good and faithful servant. We don't even know to look that up. You know that well done. You all want to hear it. You all want to hear it. The one time, Acts 15:29. That you abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality. If you keep yourselves from these, you will do well. Who doesn't want to do that? Who doesn't want to be the teacher that says, wow, I hope they do that in heaven, and they, you know, and the angels rejoice if somebody gets brought back, and there'll be like much rejoicing. It'll all be awesome, because these 4 things I just read here, 1, abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, from blood, from what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality. This is a laid on requirement for you that is, you know, this is your minimum requirement. Requirement. As taught in the New Testament, over and over again, at least 3 times in these exact, you know, paraphrased words, where all 4 are mentioned as requirements. But some people want to say, no, requirements just mean like if I want to wear a head covering, or if I want to do this or that, it's only something that is it's my own choice. There isn't anything that meant that it is essential, although this is a root of 2 words, both pretty much meaning you're going to be forced to do it. This is a necessity that will be accomplished by force, or it's the very, you know, it is the most fitting, apt, you know, conduct, or how you should contact it. You know, it at that time, nothing should be more important to you than, you know, acting upon this necessity. There's no reason this word, you know, should just be a one-time word. It must be. It is a necessity. I have need. You should be in subjection to the ruling elders of the church. That's who it's talking about, the ruling powers. You're in subjection to your leaders in the church. I know, not me, baby. Not me. I know, not you. I know, not you. You're not going to be in submission to anybody, are you? Under compulsion. These are things that are necessities. Yet, I don't think people really care if it goes well with you. That's been my contention. But you want to hear this, well done, you good and faithful servant. And that's what you have to be. Adopted, loved, known before the foundation of the world, called to be a good servant. One whose greatest joy in their free time of imagination would be found waiting at the gate because everybody else is in bed and you're not sleepy and you don't want to jack off. So you decide to go and say, maybe tonight the Lord's coming back, and he did come back that night. And you had the gate open and said, are you hungry? Are you hungry? Because your master's not out there, not working, not getting it done. He's not out there like the rest of the people trying to buy a bigger yacht with all the money you're making him. He's working harder than you'll ever know. Your master has not been on a vacation. He's been getting ready to provide himself a living sacrifice. I'm going to play something about the Huguenots for just a second here. What the heck? These are traps. Nobody wants to give away their copyright right. Well, that's how you steal a secret letter, I guess. This is how the Huguenots had to communicate in secret. Good Lord, I hope they show him attaching it to a pigeon. Put it on a pigeon, dude. This is how you receive it, I guess. Know it's real. Well, we have to be wise as serpents because they are going to try to be killing us. That's all. Is it that hard for women to dress modestly? Is it really?
The Siege of La Rochelle of 1572 to 1573 was a massive military assault on the Huguenot city of La Rochelle by Catholic troops during the fourth phase of the French Wars of Religion, following the August 1572 Street Bartholomew's Day Massacre. The conflict began in November 1572 when inhabitants of the city refused to receive Armand de Gantat, Baron de Baronne, as royal governor. Beginning on February 11, 1573, the siege was led by the Duke of Anjou. Political considerations following the Duke's election to the throne of Poland in May 1573 resulted in negotiations, culminating on June 24, 1573, that lifted the siege on July 6, 1573. The Edict of Boulogne, signed shortly thereafter, brought an end to this phase of the Civil War. The Siege of La Rochelle was contemporaneous with Catholic assaults on the cities of Sommières and Sancerre. La Rochelle at the time of the 1572 to 1573 siege. Since 1568, La Rochelle had been the main base of the Huguenots in France. A city of 20,000 inhabitants and a port of strategic importance with historic links to England, La Rochelle benefited from administrative autonomy and had become overwhelmingly Huguenot. After the Street Bartholomew's Day Massacre and other massacres across France in the fall of 1572, numerous Huguenots fled to the city of La Rochelle as a last refuge. The city was well fortified, with access to the sea. The conflict started in November 1572, when inhabitants of the city refused to receive Armand de Gantat, Baron de Baronne, as royal governor. Charles IX ordered the city to be besieged. In the middle of November, François de Lannoy, sent by Charles IX to negotiate with the city, was invited by the inhabitants to take up their defense. With the king's acceptance, Lannoy joined the besieged city but was unable to effect a solution to the crisis, and on March 12, 1573, he left the city and watched the subsequent events from the royal camp. Western side of La Rochelle, with remaining towers of Vauclair Castle and filled moats, by Antonius Lafrairie, Rome, circa 1573. German print of the Siege of La Rochelle, with the city in the background. And the fleet of Gabriel, Comte de Montgomery, in the upper left corner. On February 11, 1573, the Duke of Anjou arrived to take command of the siege with 28,000 men. His massive resources were gathered from Paris, Picardy, Normandy, Poitou, Saintonge, and Angoumois. The army included the Duke's brother François d'Alençon, the two former leaders of the Huguenots, Henry of Navarre and Henri I of Bourbon, Prince de Condé, both had recently converted to Catholicism, members of the Guise family, Charles of Lorraine, Duke of Mayenne, Claude, Duke of Aumale, Henry I, Duke of Guise, and other nobles including Louis IV de Nevers, Guillaume de Tora, Henri de la Tour d'Auvergne, Filippo di Piero, Strozzi, Albert de Gondi, Blaise de Montluc, Artist de Cassé-Brissac, Pierre de Bourdet, Seigneur de Brantôme, and Armand de Gantat. Among those nobles were some who remained suspicious of royal intentions and deplored the violence of the Street Bartholomew's Day Massacre, and some who were sympathetic to the Protestant cause. Political intrigues were in the royal camp. Henry, Duke of Anjou in 1570. Painting by Jean de Court, 8 assaults on the city were waged from February to June. The attacks, along with cold winter, resulted in large losses on the royal army's side. On March 26, 1573, 150 attackers were killed in an accidental explosion of a mine intended to destroy the ramparts. The Duke of Anjou was himself wounded several times during the siege. On May 23, 1573, 6,000 Swiss Guard mercenaries arrived as reinforcements for the royal army, but the attack 3 days later was a disaster for the royal troops. Gabriel de Lorges, Comte de Montgomery, the inhabitants of the city sent an ambassador to Queen Elizabeth I of England to seek her assistance, but she was still bound by the 1572 treaty with France and so could send only a limited number of ships. Led by Gabriel, Comte de Montgomery.
That sounds an awful lot to me like, oh, I'd love to help you people that are getting, up to 22,000 prisoners were crucified. But I'd love to help you, but I have a treaty.
Welcome to the story of liberty. The Huguenot, an interesting name, the French Huguenots, were members of the Protestant Reformed Church of France during the 16th and 17th centuries. The Huguenots were persecuted over and over simply because they believed in the Bible. Years had passed since the 95 Theses were nailed to that door in the Wittenberg Church. Yet during this time, men had been thinking for themselves in France. In the old town of Meaux, men began to independently think. Meaux was a wicked place, and the priests were no better than the people, drinking wine and leading dissolute lives. One day, a man named James Lefebvre, a priest, came to Meaux, and he had translated the Bible into the French language. He told the people that they must repent of their wrongdoing and live right. And he preached so faithfully day after day that in a short time the place became one of the most orderly cities in all of France. Instead of swearing, the peasants sung psalms. Instead of carousing about town and doing things that were wrong, they held prayer meetings. Great things happened in that city. The faith grew, but as they went to the streets, they began to be ridiculed for their faith. And they were called the Huguenots, the people who sung in the streets. And soon they became known as the Huguenots. From Meaux, the soldiers would go on to the town of Marindol, and the soldiers would not let the Huguenots live their lives in peace. They called them heretics, and they were bent on cutting their throats. Here they plunged their spears into the chests of the defenseless people. They hurled men and women from the walls upon the rocks below. They seized all their goods and homes and left it in a indescribable desolation. And have the people
The Roman Catholics, the Trinity loving, kill you if you don't believe in the Trinity, burn you alive, and force the Protestants to go, yeah, you're Christians too. We don't want, yeah. We know you believe in the Trinity. We believe in the Trinity, so don't kill us. They're talking about the Roman Catholics did this to people like me and you who want to just be left alone and live a Bible life.
Altered? No. Have they committed any crime? No. Are they law-abiding and peaceful? Yes. They have only been reading their Bible and worshiping God in their own way. That is all they have done. Well, throughout time, we see the persecution of the Huguenots. They faced it over and over. Mary, Queen of Scots, she rounded them up in charges of heresy and employed torture and burned them as punishment. Civil wars broke out, and there were massacres over and over, and the Huguenots ran away from France, and they made their way into many different places. They were, of course, persecuted again at the Edict of Fontainebleau, and made their exodus to places that would receive them. They went to South Africa. They went to North America. And they made their way over to a place to seek haven from religious persecution.
So once again, this is not my video. This is from the Story of Liberty. I'm not trying to make any money off of it. I want you to know how it goes. You can go to their website, The Persecution of the French Huguenots. It's from 2012. I like it. This is not an attempt to make money off of it in any way, just showing it so that people can know how vicious and cruel the Roman Catholics are, and that they are just being used by the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians, and anybody that goes kisses the Pope's ring is an enemy of God.
What would become known as St. Augustine, and settled at what is now Beaufort, South Carolina. 2 years later, in 1564, another group of Huguenots settled at the mouth of the St. Johns River in Florida, only to be massacred by a Spanish expedition. Over and over throughout history, these people made their way around the world to seek refuge in the Netherlands and Wales and England. They became prominent people. They made their way to Ireland.
Did you see who built that Star Fort, St. Augustine Star Fort? Who had the kit, who took the loan, and then who got backstabbed?
Plantations of Ireland. To Germany and Scandinavia, they traveled. The effects of the Huguenots' departure from France left France kind of brain dead for a long time. The persecution diminished about 150 years later, and we see the continued number of French churches descended from the Huguenots. Even here in the United States, in Charleston, South Carolina, is the home of the only Huguenot church in the United States. But some of our founding fathers, like John Jay and Paul Revere, were of Huguenot descent. And you may have seen the movie Braveheart, which portrays a man named Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, in the American Revolutionary War. He was a guerrilla fighter in South Carolina, and he was predominantly Huguenot heritage.
Well, I'm not all for that violence.
The Huguenots were Protestants, many of whom fled persecution in their homelands and settled in what is now New York State. Since the 16th century, these followers of John Calvin had claimed many of the educated, accomplished, and intellectuals as members, but had endured waves of maltreatment in Europe and left to find a safe place to practice their religion in peace.
Now, I don't like the strict, where they weren't followers of John Calvin.
In 1640, many French Huguenots arrived in New Amsterdam. Although the Huguenots lived peacefully with the Dutch, they wanted to have a place of their own, where their beliefs, culture, and language could be preserved. They were granted 39,000 acres near Kingston, establishing communities known as New Paltz. Huguenots also established New Rochelle and a community or congregation in New York. Despite their best efforts to remain separate, however, the culture of the Huguenots began to blend with the Dutch and English cultures around them. The influence of the Huguenots also had a lasting impact in the Hudson River Valley. They brought their tradition of hard work, determination, and excellence. They were among the first to believe in equal education for men and women, and contributed many new farming ideas to the burgeoning society. They were fine craftsmen and were well known as lace makers, clock makers, silversmiths, and furniture makers. In fact, one Huguenot you've probably heard of was not just a Revolutionary War hero, but an accomplished silversmith from a long line of silversmiths by the name of Paul Revere.
Oh, Tagalog.
Kamusta, mga kapitan?
That's Tagalog.
Welcome back to the story of liberty. A day called St. Bartholomew Day will never be thought of the same way because in France there's a king named King Charles IX of France. He's a weak boy, and his mother, Catherine de Medici, keeps him under her thumb. She hates the Christians, the Christian Huguenots, and would like to see every last one in France executed. She has a plan for their extermination, and she conspires with the Duke of Guise and the Cardinal of Lorraine. She sees that the Huguenots are too powerful to be crushed in battle, so she'll bring about a truce and lull them into a marriage. So she's willing to marry her daughter to one of the Huguenots to lull them into this peace. She poisons her future son-in-law's mother and invites all the Huguenots to the wedding. Even their Admiral Coligny, a man who has led the Huguenot armies to battle. He trusts in Charles IX. He didn't think that Charles would harm him, so he comes.
No, where did you think they got the idea for that red wedding in Game of Thrones?
Well, the canopy and the platform are erected in front of the church, and all Paris is there. The drums beat, the trumpets sound, the bells fill the air. The royal procession begins through the streets to Notre Dame. The marriage is about to take place. The Huguenots hope that this marriage will help heal the divisions between the Huguenots and the Catholics and give peace to France. But no, that is not the plan. Admiral Coligny is shot in the arm as he leaves the wedding. The wedding was on Sunday, but now it's Friday, and there's all kinds of whispering. Now, the committee is saying it must be done tonight. The Huguenots are leaving. Catherine presses her son, who's only 21 years old and he's weak, that it must be done. The Huguenots must be killed. Coligny must be killed. Well, now it's midnight. Paris is in slumber, but not all are asleep because the Duke of Guise, the Duke of Agen, Catherine de Medici, and the ruffians, they have their swords drawn and they're awake on this Sunday morning, the day of St. Bartholomew. At daybreak, the bell rings and crushing out of the Huguenots will begin. This education that Charles has received from his mother, that the end always justifies the means. The school of falsehood is not obliterated all sense of what is right and honorable. But he has always obeyed her. He's a boy without a mind of his own. He springs to his feet and he says, do it, kill him. Kill all the Huguenots in Paris, that none may be left. The orders are given at once, and he rushes out of his room into his chamber.
And you wonder where the bones came in the catacombs of Paris? How do you hide what he is about to describe?
And they strike the bell. The old brave admiral is asleep in his chamber. They come in, kill him. throw him out the window. The Duke of Guise smashes his face with his foot. Catherine de' Medici is not satisfied. And now, as Paris is to seemingly a quiet place, all the Huguenots are seized. The Swiss guards of the king are let loose upon them, and they're all massacred. They lie in a heap in the courtyard of the Louvre. 200 of the noblest men of the kingdom are killed. Charles and Catherine, they go out and see the dead Huguenots that they danced with 3 days ago, and they laugh. It is said that hyenas laugh when they have dug up the bones of the dead and crunched them beneath their teeth. Never before will St. Bartholomew be thought of. Families are broken up, husband from wives, parents from children, young men from the maidens who they love. They will see no more this side of the grave. In the river are thousands of floating corpses, men, women, children. No age, no sex is spared. Kill the heretics is the cry of the soldiers. The mothers pray for their children, but there's no pity. The massacre goes on, not only in Paris, but in Lyons and Orleans. 70,000 men, women, and children are slaughtered, and the bells of Rome ring. The preachers in Rome deliver eloquent orations. A messenger carries a golden rose to Charles as a present. But now 15 months have passed, and Charles is acting strangely. 15 months and 70,000 innocent people are slaughtered. His conscience is awake, and his mind is racked with remorse. The screeches of the victims of St. Bartholomew's Day is ringing in his ears. He sees men, women, and children running through the streets crying for mercy, pursued by the bloodthirsty wretches. What evil have I done, he says. God, forgive me, have mercy on me. Despair sets in, and he knows he's lost. And on July 30th, 1574, his breath goes away. And now Catherine's younger son becomes King Henry III, the King of France.
The massacre with the murder of Gaspard de Colonne, above left, depicted by Giorgio Vasari. The line of people they executed that day and burnt alive as torches is covered in the Mott Fox's Book of Martyrs.
Good evening.
Of identity and a sense that France, although a very secular and lay society now, is still fundamentally not partly their religion, that it is different.
Yes. Recognizing the case that Charles was not the crazed murderer that this may not be, that it was more popular.
The execution of the Huguenot population, who were already hated as heretics and rebels against the crown. Now, if you look closely at this scene, you will see that the massacres here are being carried out all by men wearing high-crowned helmets. These mark them out as the liveried servants or liveried soldiers serving the king, the Duke of Guise, and other Catholic leaders. This is inaccurate, but telling. Many, if not most, of the deaths were the result of popular violence. But the Protestant artist here wanted to depict, either because this is how he heard the story, we don't have any reason to think he was actually there, it was done by a German, but he wanted to depict the killings because believed them to be officially sanctioned and deliberate treachery and not the accidental result of crowds that got out of control. The sense of treachery is heightened by such scenes as these women who are begging for their children's life. A little hard to see here, but that's what's going on there. And of course, here, people stripping bodies dead and throwing them into a river already running with bodies and blood. So the question then, having already said that I don't believe the king ordered the massacre, why is it so confusing? Why do people believe he did? Well, Charles himself contributed to that because he told contradictory stories on every side. To Protestant audiences, he insisted, initially at least, that the whole thing was the unfortunate result of a popular uprising organized by the Duke of Guise. Charles sent quite different letters, however, to Catholic powers. To them, he gave the same explanation that he offered to the Catholic magistrates of his parliament and a public appearance 2 days after the killing began. That which was done, declared the king, was by his express commandment to prevent a most detestable and cursed conspiracy begun by the admiral and his adherents and accomplices. So to the Protestants, he blames the Catholics, to the Catholics, the Protestants. And these contradictory expressions to us say just one thing. The king was willing to say whatever he thought people wanted to hear.
Yeah, well, what new, right? What's new? Want to stop in to say, yeah, the studio, let's see, Tom, trying to catch up at 1.5 times the speed. Let's see, been a while here. Have people watching, but you know, we've still got a ways to go here. I want to get into some Bible study for tonight. The Waldensians, they were another ones like the Huguenots, preached apostolic poverty, you know, stood up against the Catholic Church for a long time. They were their heretics, but all of it went away. And supposedly we're all just, you know, a happy United States of America where, you know, the Baptist and Catholic can argue all they want, but still the majority of the mainstream would say, oh, you know, we're still the bride of Christ together. They love the Trinity. And that is their defining, you know, most important of what they take from the Bible. And, you know, the Cathars, you know, it's part of it too. We're going to close this one out. We're going to see what's going on. Now, what were the Savoyard-Waldensian Wars? And I mean, what would drive humans to do this? What would drive humans to do these things? You know, in a Christian context, these things in there is what is being done. They were a series of conflicts between Waldensians, also known as Vaudois, and the Savoyard troops of the Duchy of Savoy. The Piedmontese Easter in 1655 sparked the conflict, but no conflict should ever lead to that, ever, 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 ever. Previous wars. That's why it's not enough to try to say we want to be like them in our own cities, just leave us alone. They have to not know where we're at, or they're going to try to kill you and take your food. If there's anything that you learn from history, when they get hungry, they'll kill you and take your food. Is it time to study what's important? Or keep pretending that they're never going to want to kill you or your children, or that you haven't been millstoned? that you don't know that Catherine de' Medici, after they killed all the Huguenots, went and hired, all these, who were the famous Renaissance painters that, they took over. It's their art that is the great things of that age. They funded the artists, probably Michelangelo. What do we know about their? I know what we call the glorious return. I know it's that they tried to instigate that themselves. But blessed are those who make it out of this mess. There was a sonnet written by John Milton of the fame of Paradise Lost about the Easter massacre of the Valdensians at the Piedmont, because it was so sad. But were they really primitives? Were the Dark Ages that dark? Could they not stay warm in their castles? I don't see that many pictures of them shivering. And it was written, one of the, a sonnet written in, if you've ever caught any of my poetry, I believe in emulating. I think that it's really good way to do it and communicate, because this is the language they've given us. And I'm not saying I'm any more than a casual user, but I in the past I have been hooked on phonics. There's just no other way to describe it or admit it. The history of Christianity, Christian religions, from what they call the first century of feet washing down to accepting, it's a part of the world. It was and is the Bible that is the reason for this world. These were the churches of Revelation. All of Asia departed Jesus. He gathered his lost sheep. We were told it was hunter-gatherers that feared lightning and started a religion because we were scared. But you're supposed to know better now. And we do know that, they rewrote everything. The Orange Arian rule, the Nicolaitans, everything. We're figuring it out. The rocks have cried out. We know a lot more than we did, but we still, there are people that, but it all does make sense. And I want to be a Christian, but I still want my foot in the world, because porn, a little bit of porn on the side, holding a lot of people back from full-blown Bible study. Bible study where it used to be people would get together and, their culture camp wouldn't lead to any shaking of the hands with the Roman Catholic Church. However, their fruit bore witness of the way they went to end justify the means culture streak, their culture struggle. We don't want anything to do with it. We know now that whatever happened between here and they're reacquiring after a reset of admiralty law, when they said, that looks good to me, let's do that. I don't want any part of it. I want another part of a Huguenot movement where we say, let's don't try to work with them in their cities. Let's leave and do that nice city thing by ourselves in secret, because we have one last chance for an unmillstone generation. That can't be asking too much, because I know in the Bible there is a group of people like that who have to be encompassed about before they're finally rescued. Because in this game of law and rules, and they've chosen chess, if they break the rules of stalemate and going to kill us anyway after we've been encompassed about, God is going to intervene and say, oh, no, you don't. It was a rescue all the time in this book, where the end, like that end, because it all happens right before the great white throne of judgment. I'll show you. It always comes back to you have to look at the Bible. And when we do, it's right there waiting for us. So we'll pull up this in chapter 20 of Revelation and ask, has this happened? Is after the Battle of Armageddon in 19 and the beast and the false prophet are thrown in a lake of fire, Satan in a pit for 1,000 years. After that 1,000 years, Satan is released from his prison and he's going to go out for battle. He's going to march against the broad plain of the earth and surround the camp of the saints in the beloved city. But fire is going to come down from heaven and consume them. And then the devil, who had deceived them into encompassing about those people, will be thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet already are. And they will be tormented, those three together, for day and night, forever and ever. That leaves us with the lake of fire, and here comes the great white throne of, because it's right after that, verse 11. Then I saw the great white throne. Here we go. And so now those three are going to get some company. Verse 12, and I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged by what was written in the books, according to what had been done. And the sea gave up their dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them. And they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. So there you go. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And well, if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So we had at least the beast and the false prophet, joined by Satan, joined by the death and Hades, and then anybody whose name was not found in the book of life. That was the other book that was opened. After all these books that record all our works, and they will be judged in front of everybody. This is going to happen. Or why are we doing this? Otherwise, why are we hanging out here searching around for, Bible shows to listen to? Isn't that why we do this? I know part of the reason I wanted to say that, I'll be on the air and talk about the Bible and, hope to engage people, have guests, things like that. Drop links in and say, if you want to talk to me, come on in if you have any questions. There it is. No way in my world, after just last year when we could have, in the 90s people chatting at one time and other people in the chat room saying, oh, please listen to the message and quit talking about how good of a fisherman you are, to realize it's been since this was the last comment I got at 7:22. I'm looking at 7:53 right now. Simon says hi and nobody said hi to him. I'm glad Tom's having some good vibes. Victoria got kind of worn out saying hi or something. But all I wanted and all I ever wanted to do was let this be a chance. If you have something to share, you can share. It's what I wanted to share. I wanted it to be a place where people can come and talk about these kind of things. But here comes Mr. Tommy. Hi, Tommy.
Hey,
What's up, man?
nothing.
Am I in trouble?
Are we no longer a place that we can share?
Nobody, not even chat with.
Not even chat. Huh?
No, 722 was the last message.
What happened?
I don't know. There's 16 people lurking right now, but nobody wants to talk anymore.
Wow. It's a drag.
If he took credit for the massacre in Catholic circles, this is because a great many Catholics at home and abroad applauded the coup. Some did not. The massacre divided Catholics and pushed moderates to seek new avenues to peace on the ground that religious hatreds were exacting too high a price. Others, however, openly expressed their joy. As one Swiss monk studying in Paris wrote back to his abbot at St. Gallen, everyone agrees in praising the prudence and magnanimity of the king, who, after having by his goodness and indulgence fattened up, so to speak, the heretics like cattle, suddenly had their throats slit by his soldiers. And support was not just expressed privately. Catholic powers sent congratulatory letters, and celebratory masses were sung at the Spanish court and in Rome. Gregory XIII, recently elected as Pope, also commissioned 2 more permanent commemorations of the massacre. The first is this medal. Oops, I'm sorry, I was supposed to show you those images also of the King and Catherine. And there's the medal. I'll come back one of those images later in any event. This medal commemorating the extirpation of the Huguenots with a bust of the Pope on one side and an avenging angel, sword in hand, standing before a pile of dead and cowering victims. Similar in content, but not in scale, are these frescoes painted by Giorgio Vasari. This is the first of 3 for the Sala Regia in the Vatican Palace. And this is the room where the Pope received ambassadors and kings. It stands right next to the Sistine Chapel, and I understand that these paintings are still there. This is Coligny being carried off injured, but that room is not normally open to visitors today, so they don't have to explain these scenes. This scene, which once again we have Coligny being tossed out the window, his body to be checked on below. But what I find particularly interesting here in Vasari's depiction, if you look at the Protestants who are being killed, they're depicted with bestial faces, ugliness, and grimaces that make them almost complicitous in their own murders. They look like people who deserve to be killed. And here in the foreground, the victim, initially in the foreground, is raising a sword, making it look like this was a fair fight with people on both sides, instead of, as it was, in fact, the murder of Huguenots in their beds. Now, these Vatican frescoes are unique. Nothing of the kind, fortunately, nothing of the kind was created in France.
Hey, Sean, what's going on, man?
I'm doing well. I was riding my bike as I usually do when I come up. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm up here at West Salem, West Hills, where I believe this is Starfort evidence here. I believe there's Starfort evidence here. And I have a friend who lives up here on the hill top, and apparently it's on top of an old cemetery. And we don't really know if they removed the tombstones and the bodies, or just the.
Why do you think it's a Starfort? What have you seen? I mean, do you see like one of those?
I first started thinking the idea that I wanted Salem to be a Starfort. I wanted it to be. But then when I was looking at Salem, I really couldn't find anything confirming. But I did have evidence that on the old 1850 map of Salem, it's like a hand-drawn thing. If you look at the riverbank, there's like a jagged star shape.
Yeah.
It's definitely a jagged star.
Sean,
But
how
then it
far
got me
away
to-
are you from it?
But
Are
what's
you
that? What's
there
that?
now?
Yeah. Yeah, there's cars driving by. Sorry. I'm on the street.
It looks like you
I,
might run out of daylight.
Yeah, it gets dark up here in West Salem fast. It's like within like a mile difference. 'Cause we're on a hill with all the trees. You gotta do yard work quick, or no daylight.
Right. Oh man, I
I
remember one time I
was curious about the.
and I had to finish by running because it was getting so dark in on the 1840.
About West Salem. Since I'm here, I was curious about above ground reservoirs and how there's springs up here, like natural springs that. Like the one in particular, it's right by a fire hydrant, and everybody I ask, they say it's the fire hydrant is leaking, but yet below the fire hydrant, it's actually growing like swamp plants, and it's year round. And I imagine if you build a reservoir around that little creek or little stream, it would eventually fill up a 1 million gallon reservoir above ground. And you'll see, as I cross this hill, how it's been
Hey,
clear
Sean,
cut.
hold on for
Yeah?
a second, Sean. Okay, I'm
Okay.
gonna. How much longer are you going to be walking?
Probably 15 minutes.
Okay, in 15 minutes, come on back. Okay.
Okay, I'll mute. Thank you.
Thanks, man. In the meantime, we'll go back to that video.
Where the renewal of war with the Huguenots necessitated a more subdued response. Nevertheless, the king did celebrate the triumph by having 2 medals struck. This is the first of them, showing very much the same scene as that last Vatican panel. Here's Charles appearing before Parliament, symbolically raising the sword of justice. Under his feet are the slain bodies of the Huguenot leaders. The second medal shows Charles wreathed in laurel, the victor's laurel, with an inscription calling him the tamer of rebels. And on the other side, the obverse side, Hercules is slaying the many-headed hydra of heresy. The small size of the medals kept the message discreet, but the self-satisfaction, this image of the king as Hercules, is clear. Praise for the king's role in St. Bartholomew's Day was, however, short-lived, and Protestant writers, of course, took the opposite point of view from the start. They cleverly co-opted the first Catholic account of the massacre that they published in Rome just 2 months after St. Bartholomew's Day, and they reversed the author's original intent, which was to celebrate Charles's clever strategy in luring the Protestants to Paris so that they could be killed. Protestants turned this around and used it as evidence of premeditation. They used this as just the first of a number of treatises and tracts that came out afterwards, justifying the rebellion against the crown, because they did go to war after St. Bartholomew's Day, and also advancing a political theory of resistance to tyranny. Now, prior to St. Bartholomew's Day, the Huguenots had tried to deny, or at least to play down, any accusations of rebellion against the crown. Even after they failed to seize Charles IX and touched off the Second Religious War in 1567, they persisted in saying that they opposed the king's evil advisors, but not the king himself. Once Charles had claimed responsibility for St. Bartholomew's Day, such proclamations of loyalty were no longer tenable. And forced to articulate a new rationale for going to war, Huguenot spokesman contended that resistance to royal authority was justified when the king violated the implicit pact between ruler and rule. And this right of resistance was elaborated in cautiously worded legal treatises then used by Locke and others more familiarly in 17th century Britain, but they were also advanced in a more direct fashion in polemics like the wake-up call to the French and their neighbors, which justified the Huguenots' revolt in the explicit context of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. This is totally uninteresting as a book, except for the fact that it was not published in Edinburgh. It was published in Strasbourg and smuggled into France. It's quickly printed, and all of the simplicity and ugliness of it is because it's clandestine literature of the time, not accepted in France, but spread there and elsewhere in Europe, because it was aimed also at a European knowledge, audience. So published in 1574, then, the wake-up call is, to my knowledge at least, the first account of the massacre to include the story of Charles taking a gun in his hand and firing on frightened Huguenots from the window of the Louvre. The incident is recounted, moreover, in a context that makes it particularly damning to the king. The author tells how Protestant nobles, lodged in the Faubourg Saint-Germain, so directly across from the Louvre, actually received word of killing in time to escape. But they couldn't believe that the king had ordered this, and in fact believed that he must himself be being held captive. And so they decide to go again across the Louvre and to try to rescue the king. But no sooner do they start out than they discover that troops are heading directly at them, and that the king is standing in a window of the Louvre, looking down at them and urging his men on. Although, in fact, the author adds that he's even heard that the king himself took up a hunting musket and cried out, "Let us shoot, for God's sake, they're fleeing." Now, the story is recounted here as rumor, something the author has been told, but it soon appears as established fact in other Protestant narratives. Recounting the massacre as a tale of Charles IX's treachery was only one of several ways the story of St. Bartholomew's Day could be used to gain support for the Protestant cause at home and abroad. And in the printed version that will be handed out at the end, I also explain how Catherine de' Medici could be blamed and the Duke of Guise could be blamed, and the Protestants could twist this to their advantage. But I had to cut that for the presentation tonight, so it's not to try your patience unduly. But I'd be happy to answer questions if anyone wants to get into those alternatives. I'm also forced to abbreviate what I'd like to say about how Protestant accounts of the massacre served religious ends in order to stick to my narrative on Charles IX. But it's important to say that in addition to justifying the Huguenot rebellion, they also memorialized the massacre's victims in edifying narratives of triumphant faith that were published as martyrologies and were brought out again. They became integral to French Protestants' identity. They offered strength and consolation when persecutions picked up again in the 17th century, especially after Louis XIV revoked the Edict of Nantes in 1685, thereby forcing Huguenots to convert, to flee France under threat of arrest, or to practice their faith only in secret. And even after French Protestants finally regained their civil rights, just on the eve of the revolution, memories of their suffering permeated their sense of collective identity.
Which it would be a good way to.
On the Catholic side, Catholic narratives also incorporated elements of divine will, only different ones, of course, for they interpreted the massacre as a sign of God's hatred of heresy. He permitted and allowed such a thing. But Catholics also, and more surprisingly, took up the Huguenots' criticism of the Valois monarchy that appeared to have authorized the murders. The avenging angels and Hercules metaphors that appeared in the first reaction disappear, but Catholics begin to take up more measured echoes of the Crown's own claim that the murders were a necessary response to a planned Huguenot coup. These first accounts play down then any direct involvement on the part of the king, and seldom mention the popular murders, but if they do, they mention them as the unfortunate work of an always unruly populace. At the same time, they counter the Protestants' resistance theory by insisting on the need for order and the fact that this can only be found in church and king. So for the moment, they're absolutists and the others are constitutionalists posing resistance. When Protestant Henry of Navarre inherits legally the French throne on Henry III's death in 1589, the position staked out by Protestants as proponents of resistance to tyranny and Catholics as defenders of order and obedience to authority briefly reversed themselves, with Catholics taking up the radical resistance theory of the Holy League and Protestants defending royal authority and absolutism. These quarrels subside once Henry IV converts to Catholicism and restores peace in the kingdom. But The important thing here for me is that the evocation
You
of
don't have
Charles
to go back
IX
all
as
the way
a
around.
tyrant
Can you go in reverse on
survives
this one?
and even grows in importance as the negative image
Little
with
pegs.
which Henry
So,
IV and
10
subsequent
o'clock.
Bourbon
It's at
kings
midnight
can
till
be
6 a.m.
compared.
right now.
Henry's publicists work hard to erase the memory of the years he spent as the leader of the Huguenot opposition by portraying his
If you
advent to
say
the French
so.
throne as a result of God's plan to rescue France from the miseries of civil war by restoring good government through his person.
Thank you.
And Henry's propaganda machine succeeds so well that when he dies in 1610, he is mourned everywhere as Henry the Great, and he is still today France's favorite king. The legend of divine sanction spun out by his publicists becomes a key pillar in his Bourbon descendants claiming rule by divine right.
Zero.
But where
I'm
Henry's
sorry.
publicists only implicitly compared him to the weak Valois
I'll
king
do
who
it,
preceded
but-
him,
So,
historians in the employ of his grandson Louis
That
XIV
is 6
made the
a.m.
comparison
That's when
explicit
they come
by
on.
using
Right.
Charles IX
Right here
as
is
an
midnight.
object lesson in
That's
bad
when they go
kingship,
up. So pull
depicting
down
him
to
as
10
badly
o'clock,
educated,
10 and 11
badly
o'clock.
raised,
Pull just down the
corrupted by
little
his foreign
edge.
mother and her decadent court. They made of
Just
him the very antithesis of the Bourbon kings
Oh,
who bring peace and
I
good
just want
order
you to do it
to the
over here.
troubled
Why are you
kingdom.
doing it at 6 a.m.?
This
Why don't
lesson
we
is
do it over
driven
here?
home by often
I
legend
bet.
as true.
Maybe did.
Charles IX's reluctant consent to the massacre made him look weak, but not tyrannical.
Okay, now.
The more
this is
damaging
10 and
image
11.
is that of the king personally firing on the Huguenots.
There you go.
And
Now,
even Jacques-Benin Bossuet, the arch theorist of Louis XIV's
is it all the way
absolutism,
in or is it
has
all
no
the way
problem
up?
incorporating this story into his history of France. That this was at best hearsay has been lost from view. Nor was the truth recovered by Enlightenment philosophes who failed to challenge the legend despite their avowed intention of questioning all received wisdom because it served so well as a denunciation of intolerance and abuse of authority.
Really?
In his Ariade,
Good.
an epic poem about Henry IV, much loved in the 18th century, Voltaire bemoans the crime and shame of the king, that is to say Charles IX, who had soiled his sacred hands in spilling the blood of his subjects. And he even adds a footnote in which he claims to have heard this story from the man who heard the story from the man who loaded Charles's gun. More hearsay, but never mind. By the French Revolution, Charles IX's complicity in the bloodshed on St. Bartholomew's Day was an accepted fact and a useful weapon against the Ancien regime. The great orator Mirabeau, discoursing on freedom of conscience in the National Assembly, is said to have gestured toward the window in the neighboring Louvre, where a French king, armed against his own subjects by
You got to
detestable
come up with
factions,
this.
shot the musket that gave the signal for St. Bartholomew's Day.
I'm good, are you?
And several years later, during the revolution's most radical phase, journalist Jean-Paul Marat justified the popular violence then occurring in Paris with an explicit comparison to St. Bartholomew's Day. What he asked are the few drops of blood that populaces spilled in the current revolution compared with the torrents that the mystical frenzy of a Charles IX caused to be spread. Is it any wonder then that the story features prominently in Alexandre Dumas' romantic novel, Queen Margot, which features a dramatic scene in which Charles IX fires furiously at the Huguenots because Henry of Navarre has refused his choice
Come
of
on,
death,
Alan.
the
Dig
mass,
with
or the
it.
Bastille. Rebuffed by Henry, Charles picks up the musket and blandishes it in a wild rage. This passage deserves to be quoted. Uttering a hoarse kind of growl, Charles turned toward the window and aimed at a man who was running along the quay in front. "I must kill someone," cried Charles IX. Ghastly as a corpse, his eyes injected with blood, and firing as he spoke, he struck the man who was running. Henry uttered a groan. Then, animated by a frightful ardor, Charles loaded and fired his musket without cessation, uttering cries of joy every time his aim was successful.
So we're
The
murdering
fictional
fleas
placement
and
here of
watching
the
them
calm and
masturbate.
resolute Henry of Navarre, the future Henry IV,
That's what we got.
next to the frenzied
So
Charles
we get
IX,
great-
underscores, I would argue, the contrast between good
Bet you
kingship
these
and bad
fleas
already
jack off
developed
when they
in the
got-
old
Not-
regime.
Bet they
The
got-
image remained relevant
It's
in
not
19th
as
century
big
political
of a grant
debates,
as the
and it
people
remains so
studying
precisely because
homosexuals.
questions of kingship
Yeah.
remain central to these debates.
Pakistan,
It could be
hundreds
used,
of
for
years
example,
back
by
then.
Orleanists in the Revolution of
I mean,
1830
Not a
to
real
justify replacing the bad king, Charles X, with the
president.
good king, Louis
Damn
Philippe.
approval.
But at the same time, Republicans, including popular historian Jules Michelet, could use this image of a king mad with rage to denounce any form of monarchy because it risked placing power into the hands of an unbalanced king. However, common it became in popular literature and histories, the image of Charles IX firing on his subjects did not entirely escape critical scrutiny. In 1857, the Society for the History of French Protestantism reprinted several articles that debated whether the incident had actually taken place. Those who said no offered three key arguments. First, that the window from which Charles allegedly fired did not exist in 1572 as part of a later edition. Second, that the sort of hunting gun, the arquebuse de chasse, that Charles was said to have fired did not have the range required to accurately hit a target on the other side of the Seine. And third, that Charles, who was an avid hunter, would have known this and would not have risked hitting the Catholic guards who pursued the Huguenots instead of his actual target. Now, the authors also offered counter arguments, even if that window didn't exist, another window, so forth. But to anyone who doesn't have a stake in the argument, it seems pretty clear. Whatever window Charles stood in, he could not have fired across the Seine at that time with the weaponry available to him, and he would have known better than to try. But even beyond the physical impossibility of the event, the king's psychology appears all wrong. The action is out of character with everything we know about Charles IX. Some historical accounts suggest that he became morose, depressed, regretful after the massacre, but none of the evidence suggests that the king was crazed or during or after the massacre.
I
This
could roll
was
this in
legend.
throw this in a bong and let you
Novelists
finish
and
it off.
historians like Michelet, feeding on the most rapidly partisan
It might, but I don't want you to cough.
century polemicists.
We're gonna be okay.
Partisan
See how I
debates
just turned this
that
me
by
forgetting the
end of
joint
19th century,
into I was trying to help you
meanwhile,
not cough?
however, Coligny's role evolved as well. As is evident from this monument.
Oh,
monument
I'm
to the
recording
admiral
too.
Placed near the site of his murder in 1889. It is now squeezed between t-shirt shops and souvenir shops on the Rue de Rivoli, directly across from the Louvre. You may well have walked past it and never noticed it. Coligny's statue is easily overlooked, and yet this is the only public monument to St. Bartholomew's Day. It was funded by public subscription, begun in 1887, and is the 100th anniversary of when the French Protestants got their full civil rights in 1787, and erected 2 years later.
You know, if anything happens here tonight, what do I want you to go away with? Do you see this sword? That's what I want you to imagine as I rejoin the show now, telling you hi. From all your history lessons, that sword, imagine the Apostle Peter when he cut off Malchus's ear. Stop thinking of it as great big fishermen go clunk with heavy Viking sword, and start thinking of the times as they were. The Apostle Peter was a trained businessman, yes, fisherman, but it sounds like, and if you study the word for the thin sword that he used, it sounds like our brother took a foil out, sliced his ear off of Malchus and said, "Who else wants some business? Leave this man alone." And how many times did I study the Lollards, the Huguenots, the Valdenese, the study of our persecution of those Trinity-loving Catholics? And in the same way, think of the Lollards and others as, gathering from little hut to hut instead of living in Star Fort world, which is what is obviously described in how they build it. So who were the Lollards? And, you know, what were their complaints? What was Lollardry? Lollardism, at the end of the 1,000-year reign, while the wheat and the tares were growing together, there were Lollards. And I hope that meant something else to them. But with everybody out there and your brains working together, can we come up with something that doesn't sound like, you know, it's just not a cool name to me. We're the Lollards. You know, it sounds like we're the half-tards, you know, or something to me. But anyway, they were initially led by John Wycliffe, a Roman Catholic theologian, which we doubt because he, you know, there was no Roman Catholic. The Roman Catholics came in because of these type of rebellions and their heresy. But anyway, we'll go with that. It's their history. They won the war. They rewrote it. He was so it makes it seem like he's a traitor, right? He was a Roman Catholic theologian who was dismissed from the University of Oxford once he got the Bible for criticism of the Roman Catholic Church, which must be different because this Roman Catholic to get its own link, and I've seen broken up links before. The Lollards' demands were primarily for reform, much like Martin Luther and John Calvin and the people that led to them had the same doctrines, yet the world insists on calling it Calvinism because of the obvious negative connections that come with the murder of Michael Servetus, the founder of the discoverer of the pulmonary system that people still study to this day. We'll look at the 12 confessions and conclusions of, but the etymology of the world, perhaps we can get a reason why. Oh, it was the popular derogatory nickname given to those without an academic background, educated only in English. Well, that's all we've got to. I don't like to go back to the Latin and that stuff, you know, because let's just speak of the phonics, who were reputed to follow the teachings of John Wycliffe in particular, and were certainly considerably energized by the translation of the Bible into the English language. Well, that would do it when the obvious conclusion is we've been lied to. The good news is actually that the Gentiles are welcomed by God, since even before Jesus, that was the time of the Gentiles, because from the time of Nebuchadnezzar on and the rebuilding of the temple, it was only the Gentiles who helped preserve the lineage of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Back to the Lollards. By the it says 1400s, Lollard had come to mean a heretic in general. And they made it always seem like the Lollards called themselves the Lollards. The term is said to have been coined by the Irish cleric Henry Crumpy, but its origin is uncertain. Lollard could be meant to mutter, to mumble, and they must have said, why are they mumbling against the Roman Catholics? Why are they coming up with their, 12 articles of not confession, but condemnation? Why are you doing this, Roman Catholic Church? And they may have been the first ones to experience the Black Death because of it. Could have been a Lollard connection in there, they seem to think. And here we see a Lollard was compared to a weed in the parable of the wheats and the tares, the one that means so much to us. The surname Lollard of an eminent Franciscan preacher who converted to the Waldensian way was a Lollard. So it's up in the air. It is up in the air. This, they say, is a Lollard poem. Wycliffe's teaching on the Eucharist were declared heresy at the Blackfriars Council of 1382. William Saltry, a priest, was reportedly burned. They make it just sound so casual because the Roman Catholics were burning them left and right. And you can't make a big deal out of this one William Saltry, right? There was many more that your conscience will be seared with as you accept these Trinity-loving, burning, alive, so-called brothers of the Protestants in this modern world. Ecumenical movement will throw you out in the mainstream if you don't count them as brothers. They'll count you as a judger. How many people in the Protestants have gone from Billy Graham on kissing the Pope's ring? Those Pope ring kissing machines. 12 conclusions is the word I was looking for. Spotted it right here. Jog into my memory. We've got that to look forward to. So, it expanded out to 37. Let's go with that. Is a church reformation declaration against the Roman Catholic. Let's get it right. It is the Roman Catholic Church. And they could have put that in there and had their link go to that. They just didn't want people to think that there's a reason to. Nothing to see here. Isn't that what the cops say? Nothing to see here. And then they go like, make a hole. Make a hole. That's what cop lingo. Let's look. Where is it? Can we get it in English? Really? It's 200 pages? This is just a preface. Let's see what it says in preface number 3, that it is the duty of a Christian state to encourage the diffusion of pure Christianity by all gentle and charitable means. Does it sound like the golden age to you? They're trying to appeal to people that will later burn them alive. And this is how they appeal. Number 4, that for this purpose, it is bound to provide a moderate and decent subsistence for the teachers of religion, that temporal honor, possession, and power belonging not to the members or ministers of Christ's church as such. Number 6, that all worldly things must be received by Christian ministers as alms, which they have no right to exact, though it is the duty of the state and the people to bestow. Verse 8, let's see that. The state ought neither directly to endow that which it believes to be erroneous, vicious, or inexpedient, nor to suffer its permanent endowment by others. By your fruits you shall know them, and when that stops being good, they're no longer endowed. Let's see what number 10 says. The Christian should ever bear in mind that violent, compulsory, and rash measures and language for the diffusion of truth are not only directly contrary to the spirit of their religion, but grossly absurd and utterly destructive of the objects they propose. So that's a point 17 by the British Museum about the remonstrance. Yikes, doodah. Neither Prelats, neither Prelestes, neither the Kenneth Schulten Hof Circular Office, that is, Chancellery, Transory, Pure Seal, and other secular officers in the Chequer. Okay, that's some old English there. That preface was so nice and tightly translated. Well, here we go back again. Well, we have the 12. That's going to have to do. Un momento. First conclusion asserts that the English church has become too involved in affairs of the state, temporal power, led by the bad example of the Church of Rome. The temporal power of the Holy See designates the political and secular influence of the Holy See, leading to the right to have governments formed that if you don't believe in the Trinity, we can kill you by burning you alive. And they'll do it. Their second conclusion was your priests are crazy. The second conclusion asserts that the ceremonies used for the ordination of priest and bishop are without scriptural basis or precedent. And that's not good. Nobody wants that. I know I don't. And because of it leads to people being ordained, that leads to their third conclusion that the practice of what they call clerical celibacy has led to people that already lean to that way saying, hey, don't worry, I want to hang out with a wife. And there were a bunch of people raping and killing people and finding out that adrenochrome is good and some people like to be tortured. Weren't those raping priests worth concluding the problem in Rome? Buggeries. Fourth conclusion, how could you even conceive of something as stupid as transubstantiation? That is that although it still looks the same, the wine and the bread has now either turned into the blood and flesh of Christ, and you better believe that, or you can burn alive along with the rest of the Trinity doubters, because the government's in charge will make sure they pass the law that says, kill them, no problem. It's what we do. Leading to the fifth conclusion, asserts that it is inappropriate for men who hold high office in the church to simultaneously hold positions of great temporal power. I am your deacon, I am your bishop, I should say, and I want to be your elected mayor. And I still want to get double dipped paid. And I want, you know, if I get a vacation from each job, I want to be able to keep them separate. Because I'm going to be busy spending my money, and they were out sodomizing the boys, traveling around, probably killing them and eating them. Seventh conclusion, the prayers for the dead. Hey, it just comes down to it. We don't know enough about it. What are you talking about? And especially requesting prayers for the dead for a financial contribution right up until the 1900s. Are you kidding me? No wonder they should go. I got a problem with that. Pilgrimages. The eighth conclusion asserts that the practices of pilgrimages and the veneration of relics is stupid and at best ineffectual for spiritual merit. At worst, it approaches idolatry. They're still being way too nice, right? In their worship of those created objects. Ninth, their idea of confession for the absolution of sin is blasphemous. You can't even hide that one, because only God, not the vicar of Christ and his minions, only God has the power to forgive sins. And because the priests did have that power, it would be cruel and uncharitable of them to withhold that forgiveness from anyone, even if they refuse to confess it. Number 10. The 10th conclusion asserts that Christians should refrain from battle, but Rome keeps sending people to war, and the people that love them get talked into being like, yeah, I've got to kill people. I've got to go kill people. I have to. If you should hear some of the people from Ukraine right now, they're saying, I want to kill those Russians, and if we catch them, we'll kill them. The 11th conclusion asserts that women in the church who have made vows of celibacy are having sex, becoming pregnant, and having abortions, and so that they don't lose their job. And we find those buried infants underneath their Roman Catholic monasteries. They're still digging up what the Roman Catholics have hidden. The most recent ones, the Native Americans that didn't comply, they raped, killed, and buried in the backyard of their orphanages and forced detention centers where they were taught to speak United States. The 12th conclusion, arts and crafts, asserts that Christians are devoting too much of their time and energy and attention to the making of beautiful objects of arts and crafts, and that people should simplify their lives and renew their devotion to godliness by refraining from unnecessary endeavors. Gandhi. Who was Gandhi's arch enemy? Winston Churchill. He did not want India to be free because India needed that money to fight their war, to sell opium. They could only control the opium if they could grow it and process it through India. Oh, he claimed he wanted to live a minimalist life. Well, that would involve him not being able to provide the people to produce the heroin.
Can have no doubt that Putin wants to create a Russian empire. He wants to recreate the order within Europe, and he has no fear of using military might to achieve it. And we're seeing this in Ukraine today. So we have to ask ourselves, what capabilities does Putin's Russia have? And what capabilities do we need in order to counter this threat today and in the future? One thing is for sure, we need to invest considerably more in the security of our country in order to defend our liberty and our democracy in this way as well.
One of the first things I remember hearing was a little girl crying. And I knew that the cry was coming from the van that was there. And I ran up to the passenger side door with one of the privates who was with me. And we looked inside the van. And the private that I was with started vomiting and ran away because he couldn't bear to look at the children the way they were. What I saw was a little girl. She was probably about 4 years old, sitting on the bench seat. With a severe belly wound and glass in her hair and in her eyes. She couldn't blink or close her eyes, and she was crying like it wasn't a pain cry. It was a cry that me having children, knowing that my daughter was the same age as this little girl, waking up from a horrible nightmare in the middle of the night, and just it was almost blood curdling. Next to her. In the middle of the bench seat, half on the floorboard with his head resting on the bench seat, was a boy about 7 years old. I immediately thought he was dead because he had a severe wound to the right side of his head. And in the driver's seat was who I assumed was the father, the way he was hunched over them in a protective manner. And he was completely destroyed. There was no way that he had survived. I grabbed the little girl out of the van, yelled for a medic, and we took her to the house that was directly behind the vehicle, where I took off my gloves, got water, and rinsed the wounds, checked for any exit wounds, other wounds that she might have had, and was picking glass out of her eyes with my hands so that she could blink. That's when in the video you can hear the medic say that there's nothing else we can do here. She needs to be evac. He takes the little girl and he runs her to the Bradley. I go back outside to the van, and I don't know actually why I went to the van. I thought that the boy was dead and the father was dead, but when I went back out there, the boy took a labored breath, and that's when I started screaming out that the boy's alive, the boy's alive, and I picked him up in my arms and started running towards the Bradley with him. The whole time telling them, it's going to be okay, don't die, don't die. And at this point, he looked up at me, just for a split second, and his eyes rolled back into his head. And at that moment, I thought he had died in my arms. But I got him to the Bradley. And when I took him to the Bradley, my commanding officer, or my platoon leader, was there. And he told me that I needed to quit worrying about these MFing kids and to go full security. At the time, the only thing I could think of was, roger that, and I went to full security. While sitting on the rooftop, I could hear them firing the Hellfire missiles into houses. I saw the pictures of the families that were in these buildings. There were no armed men in these buildings. They were just families, women, children, who were killed. I got back to the FOB later that day, and I remember thinking to myself, I was like, there's no way that we did that. It had to have been the men on the corner. There was one guy who had an RPG and one guy who had an AK-47. And, from being over there, you're like, okay, well, these guys are obviously insurgents if they have weapons, not knowing that these other men were cameramen. And what frequently happens in Iraq is if there's a person with a camera, people will come out of their homes and say, hey, look at me. This is what I have. Put me on TV. Put me on the news. Make me famous. Now pay me for my picture. There was no RPG rounds in the RPG. To me, my reaction is that I don't think that they were armed to fight us. They were just showing off for the cameramen that were there. But later on that night in the FOB, while I was washing the blood of the children off of me, I couldn't really cope with it. I was having a hard time dealing with the fact that we did that, the Apaches did that. So I went to my staff sergeant who was in my line, in my chain of command, and I told him, I think I need to see mental health. I need to go talk to somebody because I'm having a hard time dealing with.
You do know that the Q faction of our government wanted to kill the people that the WikiLeaks for releasing this type of information, for hearing these type of things. They thought that the guy should be
I've
dead.
been saying this for a long time. That was one incident of many that you guys got to see. Things like this happened almost on a daily basis in Iraq. It may not have been an Apache. It could have been a Bradley. I saw a Bradley fire on a van load of children, nothing more than children, and watch the Iraqi police pull bodies out.
Carnage. Webster's dictionary defines it as great and bloody slaughter, usually taking place in battle. Most of us have never seen true carnage with our own eyes and find it hard to imagine anything more than what we've seen in the movies. But carnage wasn't a term coined by someone who watched gory films. It comes from real life and occurs in our world even today. This photo, taken by Dennis Block in 1991, depicts such carnage. During the United Nations coalition offensive in the Gulf War, American aircraft and ground forces intercepted and attacked retreating Iraqi forces, destroying over 2,000 vehicles on the night of February 26th. When dawn broke, this was the sight that lay over the land. Ruined vehicles littering the desert. Oil and debris covering the ground like blood pooling beneath a gun.
Do those look like military vehicles? Some of them do.
Shot victim. Hundreds upon hundreds of mangled trucks, semis, and other vehicles bake in the wasteland sun, a chilling depiction of how very destructive war can be. But then a cruel realization takes hold. In each of these vehicles, there were one or more Iraqi soldiers hastily making what they would hope would be a successful retreat. Though we cannot see their bodies, it is obvious that they are there, lying askew in bullet-riddled passenger seats, or strewn motionless among the wreckage. This is an image that illustrates the ugly face of carnage.
From Iraq to Panama, George H.W. Bush was responsible for countless deaths. Far from being the moderate voice of reason he is now being presented as in the era of Trumpism, he was an elite custodian of capitalism and empire. In 1989, the administration of the newly inaugurated President Bush invaded the tiny Central American nation of Panama in order to oust dictator Manuel Noriega, who had himself been a longtime CIA asset, who for years worked closely with the United States, helping it to fund right-wing death squads while he was trafficking drugs. The US brutally bombed Panama, burning down thousands of homes, leading to the nickname Little Hiroshima. Historian Greg Grandin noted that the bodies of dead Panamanians were shoveled into mass graves. But Bush's bloodiest atrocities were yet to come. In August 1990, Iraq militarily occupied and annexed its southern neighbor Kuwait. The Bush administration wanted a war in response, and in order to sell this war, it spread blatant lies. In October 1990, a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl testified before the U.S. Congressional Human Rights Caucus and claimed,
"While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers coming to the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators, and left the children to die on the cold floor. It was horrifying."
Human rights organizations like Amnesty International obediently echoed this myth, and George H.W. Bush used it to justify a war on Iraq.
They had kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
It was only after this war, in 1992, that it was revealed that this 15-year-old girl was actually the daughter of Kuwait's ambassador to the U.S., and that the lies she spread had been orchestrated by a PR firm on behalf of the Kuwaiti monarchy. But remember, Bush had declared just a few years ago that he didn't care what the facts are. In 1991, the 41st U.S. president.
Well, there you see it. Well, 3 hours and 31 minutes. You don't need to be convinced anymore. You've seen him declare the New World Order. And I'll be doing some more studying for tomorrow. Thank you all for staying with me. That's why we're here. You know, we make commitments to do certain things and study the Bible. Tomorrow, hopefully, we can study, Lord willing, the book of Galatians and keep going with this. If you could, if you're a man, take off your hat. If you're a woman, appreciate it if you put on a bonnet. You don't have to join us in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this chance to share your word and talk about the Bible and study the Bible and come to these realization that the stones are crying out, they've hidden history. Thank you, God, for all of these things. And as you lead our every day, I pray along the way that these friends will have their aches and pains taken care of, that they can pray and ask for wisdom. What can they do to help? Let us, take care of our feet. Let us take care of our diets. Heavenly Father, I pray, superintend over our minds by increasing our faith in how we can rightfully present our bodies as living sacrifices to you, who's called us to be witnesses to you, believing this is not our home. Heavenly Father, I pray that you will give us bodies that are naturally immune in supernatural ways to all poisons and viperous things. Heavenly Father, I want unmillstone children to know unashamedly that cancer can't live in oxygen-rich blood. Father, there's so many things we can do to help prevent children from ever having a millstone. Let us, Heavenly Father, let have 2 or 3 agree in prayer to be willing to do whatever it takes to keep children from being millstone. And Heavenly Father, help us to quickly decide how we want to live our lives. I pray, Heavenly Father, for each and every one here. You know their names. I pray that you will bless their hearts and give them peace and sweet dreams tonight. For the women, I specifically pray for that their tummies and that those headaches that they get that seem so common now are affecting them more. The digestion is real bad for women nowadays, men. We should be more understanding of that. These things we pray in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. It's a flat earth nation. Mud flood was Armageddon. You know, I'm never going to tell you anything else. Why would I? I'm busy trying to prove I have your best interest at heart. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho.